I think it's time he met his real father." That sentence hit harder than any foul ball to the ribs. It landed soft, like she was offering to pass the butter, but it detonated something in my chest that I still can't name. We were sitting at our usual Sunday brunch spot, Mara, Ryan, and me, on the patio of that pretentious cafe she liked because the napkins were cloth and the coffee came in minimalist cups with no handles. Ryan was halfway through a tower of lemon ricotta pancakes, earbuds in one ear, scrolling through something on his phone. 15 years old, moody, with a shoulder twitch he picked up from baseball drills I taught him when he was 10. He used to practice swing mechanics with me in the garage until it got dark. And now I was just the guy who paid the mortgage. "I'm sorry," I asked, but not because I didn't hear her. I just wanted to believe I hadn't. Mara didn't even look up. She buttered her toast with that deliberate calm she used when she was about to tell me we were trying something new with the budget. "He's been asking." "It's natural, Mark. He's curious. I think it's time." That's when the blood in my body slowed. "I thought I was his father," I said. "You were." Not even a pause. "But now, he wants to know where he really comes from." And just like that, 15 years of school pickups, cleat tying, late-night fever runs, college saving plans, and being the one man Ryan could count on, all condensed into a polite obituary. "You were." There was no affair, no big fight, no warning, just a subtle rebranding of my identity, served over Eggs Benedict. I looked at Ryan. He didn't even flinch, didn't hear us. Or maybe he did and pretended he didn't, which somehow cut deeper. I didn't make a scene. I didn't demand answers. I didn't flip the table or storm out like a bad soap opera. That would have made it too easy for Mara. She would have turned me into the angry stepdad. No, I just sat there and finished my black coffee. It tasted like wet coins. That night, I packed. No dramatic speeches. No calls to friends. I left my wallet, my house keys, even my Apple Watch on the nightstand. I left a single handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "Don't look for me. You won't like what you find." I could still hear the ceiling fan creaking above me as I zipped up my duffel. The fan I installed myself. Like everything in that house, shelving, fire pit, the damn herb garden I never cared about, but she insisted on, we built it together. Or at least I thought we did. Before I walked out, I paused in the hallway, outside Ryan's room. The door was slightly cracked. He was on his Xbox, yelling into the mic, calling someone a bot. I remembered when that room was painted with stars, when I used to read to him from that dog-eared copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. He used to ask me what loyalty meant. I guess now he knows. I didn't say goodbye. I just turned and left. By the time I crossed the Oregon border and hit the empty stretch near Boise, I realized something strange. I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling or muttering to myself like in the movies. I was just hollow, clean, like a whiteboard wiped down with one of those squeaky felt erasers. They thought I'd linger. They thought I'd fight to stay in their lives like a dog scratching at a locked door. But they'd forgotten something. I taught that boy how to hold his ground on the pitcher's mound. I taught him to shut out noise. And now I was doing exactly that. I drove in silence. 14 hours of interstate, winding roads, switchbacks, and memories clawing at the back of my skull like rats in a burlap sack. The cabin sat in northern Colorado, near a town so small the gas station doubled as the post office. I'd inherited it from my Uncle Walt after his heart gave out on a deer trail. I'd only been here once before, 15 years ago, when Ryan was a toddler. Mara hated the smell of firewood and the lack of Wi-Fi. Said it gave her migraines. Perfect. When I pulled up the gravel path, the place looked like it hadn't exhaled since Walt died. Shutters hanging loose like drunk arms, chimney half collapsed, snow crusted along the eaves like it had made a home there. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and just sat, listening. For what, I don't know. Maybe for the last part of myself snapping off. The front door didn't creak. It groaned like it knew I wasn't leaving this time. I didn't unpack right away. I walked around first, fingers brushing the scarred bark of the trees, boots sinking into the crunchy, frost-bitten grass. The air smelled like pine, rot, and mercy. The next morning, I started working. Not because I had to, but because I needed to. Splitting logs by hand became my therapy. The rhythmic thunk of the axe biting through it cleared something in my chest. I rebuilt the generator from Walt's old schematics in the tool shed. The roof leaked, so I patched it. The floorboards creaked, so I nailed them down. Every fix was a sentence I never got to say. I burned the note Mara left in her letter tray from 2 Christmases ago. Let's make this year about gratitude. I found it wedged behind the bread box when I cleaned out my bag of old receipts. The irony made me laugh, sharp and bitter. There was no phone signal unless you stood barefoot on the metal roof during a thunderstorm. I tried it once. Just once. Nothing. And good. Let them wonder. Let them pace around that silent house I paid for, checking the driveway, expecting my truck to come back. Let them think. I kept a journal. Not to write about them, but to remember how to talk to myself. I made a list, things I taught Ryan. It filled 2 pages. How to bunt. How to check tire pressure. How to shake a man's hand like you mean it. How to apologize without excuses. How to leave quietly. Most nights I sat by the fire with a tin of beans and a bottle of wild turkey Walt left behind. I'd sip, stare at the flames, and feel the numbness settle deeper. Not the bad kind. The kind that finally let your jaw unclench. I found one of Ryan's old drawings in my wallet. He was 6. It was stick figures, me, him, and a weirdly triangular dog. Underneath, he'd written my hero. I stared at that drawing for an hour, then folded it in half and slid it under a floorboard beneath the bed. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I never wanted to find it by accident. People think revenge is loud, rage-filled, explosive. Mine was quiet. It looked like a man fixing a roof alone in the Rockies, while the world forgot what he meant. And that's what made it so sharp. I wasn't hiding. I was erasing myself. Intentionally. And every log I split, every screw I drove into the siding, every breath I took in that bitter air whispered the same thing. You had me. You lost me. You'll never find me again. The first time he called, Ryan was beaming. Not in that goofy kid way, either. No, this was teenage bravado trying to mask something raw underneath. Hope, probably. Or desperation dressed up as finally. He said he wants to see me, Ryan told Mara as he scraped leftover Alfredo into the sink. Wants to come out next weekend. Mara smiled too quickly. That's great, sweetie. Really great. She went upstairs that night and cried in the bathroom with the water running, like Ryan wouldn't hear. Plans were made. Steak night. His favorite root beer. Ryan even cleaned out the garage, muttering that maybe they could work on the old motorcycle together. He used to ride, right? Mara nodded. She didn't mention that the last time Ryan's biological father touched a wrench, it was to pawn a socket set. She also didn't mention how many times she'd paid his rent under the table, or that the only consistent thing about him was his inconsistency. Friday came. Ryan waited on the porch for 3 hours. No text. No call. Nothing. At 9:07 p.m., Mara got a message that just read, "Sorry. Work stuff. Rain check." Ryan didn't say a word. Just stood up, went inside, and microwaved leftover chicken nuggets. When she asked if he wanted to talk about it, he replied with a blank, "He's busy." It's fine. But it wasn't. You could see the shift, small, almost surgical. He started checking his phone every 5 minutes. Every buzz, every ding. By Monday, he had a new date picked out. He said next weekend. Swear. This time Mara didn't prep the dinner. Didn't remind Ryan to vacuum the car. She just sat in her robe on the couch, sipping wine at 2 p.m. like it was normal. A sitcom played on mute. When Ryan asked why she looked tired, she blamed allergies. The second cancellation came via voicemail. Slurred. Something about a friend's birthday, bad directions, next week for sure. Ryan laughed. Not the funny kind, more like an inhale that didn't know where to land. Guess he's bad with calendars, he said. He didn't wait on the porch that third time, but he did wear the shirt Mara said made him look sharp. He paced the house like a man waiting for a verdict. When the clock hit 10:23 p.m., he peeled it off and stuffed it into the laundry bin like it insulted him. The fourth time, no excuse even came. By then, he stopped talking about the guy altogether. But he also stopped doing other things. Skipped practice. Didn't respond to Coach Callahan's texts. He used to spend hours hitting balls into the backyard net. Now the net sagged, wind rattled, untouched. Mara noticed he stopped calling her mom. Just yeah or whatever. He didn't fight. Didn't slam doors. Just went quiet. And that silence spread into the walls, the carpet, The echo in the kitchen. It replaced the creaks Mark used to fix, the background whistle of his old kettle, the way he hummed off-key when doing dishes. The house became quieter than it had ever been, and somehow louder with absence. Mara tried once to bring up Mark. He always showed up, she said gently. Ryan didn't look up from his cereal. Yeah, well, people get tired of showing up. And that was it. They traded the man who built forts in the yard, taught Ryan how to oil a glove, and snuck extra bacon on his plate when Mara wasn't looking, for a name on a birth certificate who couldn't even bother to reply with full sentences. Mark had vanished, yes, but this new ghost they'd invited in? He never even showed up. And slowly, quietly, Ryan began to realize the cruelest truth of all. They didn't lose Mark. They threw him away. It started with the pipes. They burst behind the downstairs bathroom wall one frosty night in January. Water crept into the hallway like it was looking for Mark. Mara stood there in slippers, hands shaking as she fumbled for towels and cursed under her breath. She'd never even known where the shutoff valve was. Mark always handled it. Quietly, before anyone noticed. Ryan didn't come downstairs. He had his headphones on, deep in some online game where loss didn't mean mildew or insurance deductibles. The plumber arrived 2 days later. Charged triple. Said the insulation was amateur hour. Mara signed the check with a look on her face like she'd swallowed gravel. Then came the gas bill. $614.37. Mark used to check the thermostat like it was a sacred ritual. Ryan liked the heat cranked, and Mark would always mutter, "We're not baking bread, kid." Now the heat ran nonstop. Mara never thought to check the settings. Neither did Ryan. By the second week of February, the mortgage bounced. Automatic payment failed. Then the car insurance lapsed. A stack of unpaid envelopes piled on the kitchen counter, red-stamped, urgent, full of terms like final notice and risk of cancellation. Mara started staying up late, staring at spreadsheets like they were ancient puzzles. Her jaw clicked from clenching. The wine bottles under the sink multiplied. Meanwhile, Ryan got detention. Twice. First for shoving a kid in the locker room. Then for skipping sixth period entirely. Mara found out when the school left a voicemail that began with, "We've tried to reach you," and ended with suspension if this pattern continues. When she confronted him, he shrugged. "Why do you care now?" That one sentence knocked the wind out of her more than the mortgage statement. She didn't reply. Couldn't. That night, she called Mark. Twice. His voicemail picked up like always. Calm. Boring. The exact same message he'd had for 5 years. "Hi, this is Mark." Leave it at the beep. She didn't leave a message. She called again the next morning. And that time, she did. "Mark, I know you said not to look for you. I get it. I do. But things are hard." Ryan's struggling. He's angry. "I don't know how to reach him." "You always could. Just, if you could talk to him. That's all. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking for your voice." She ended the call with a whisper, "Please." No response. She emailed. Nothing. She sent a letter, long, handwritten, shaky cursive. She wrote about the pipe, the bills, the bruises she saw on Ryan's knuckles. She told him she missed the quiet competence, the presence. That she'd never realized how much of the house was balanced on his back until he walked away. Still nothing. Mark had vanished like a veteran ghost. Left no forwarding address. No trail. Just an absence that now filled every square inch of their house. His drawer in the bedroom was still half open. She'd left it like that, too afraid to touch the socks inside, as if they might disintegrate. Ryan stopped eating dinner at the table. He microwaved whatever was around and ate standing up, hunched over the counter, chewing like it was a punishment. His eyes never met hers. One night, Mara found him asleep in the laundry room, curled up with Mark's old sweatshirt, the one with the oil stain on the sleeve. She sat down beside him, leaned against the dryer, and didn't say a word. The house that used to hum with quiet laughter and the occasional sarcastic jab now felt like it held its breath every time the front door opened, hoping maybe it was him. But it never was. And the weight of what they'd done settled like dust on every unused chair, every unpaid bill, every echo in the hollow walls. It was a Tuesday when he finally arrived. No fanfare. No heads up. Just a dented black Impala pulling up at 8:47 p.m., headlights flickering like a dying firefly. Ryan stood in the window, half in disbelief, half afraid to believe it all. Mara was already in her robe, mascara smudged, wine glass untouched for once. She pulled the door open before he had a chance to knock. "Travis," she said, her voice low and flat. "Hey," he muttered, like they were old friends running into each other at a gas station. He swayed just slightly, not enough for someone to call him out directly, but just enough for her to smell the cheap whiskey clinging to his breath like a second skin. Ryan stepped forward, hesitated. Then, awkwardly, "Hey." Travis turned, blinked at him for a second, then smirked. "Well, damn. Look at you. Tall. You play ball." "Yeah," Ryan said, a flicker of pride in his voice. "Shortstop. Nice. I used to pitch," Travis lied. Mara's lips twitched, but didn't open. They stayed in the living room for about 20 minutes. Travis talked. Fast. Loud. About opportunities and reconnecting, and how fatherhood's a marathon, not a sprint. Every few minutes, he'd rub his eyes and ask for a beer, then change his mind and ask for cash instead. "You got a Motel 6 around here?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck. "Just for a night or two while I get settled. I was in Portland yesterday. Job stuff. Lot going on." Mara handed him $80 in silence. Ryan offered to show him the garage. The batting cage setup Mark had helped him build. Travis nodded, but waved it off. Yeah, maybe tomorrow, kid. Got jet lag. From Portland. Don't be a smartass." Ryan flinched, not from the words, but from the tone. It had teeth. Mark never used that tone. Not once. By 10:15, Travis was gone, back to his car, grumbling about directions and complaining that his phone charger mysteriously stopped working. Ryan went to bed, confused but not defeated. Not yet. Then came the phone call. It was the third night. Travis had shown up again, this time smelling like roadkill and regret. He asked for more money, something about a storage unit in Idaho, unpaid tickets, some overdue child support nonsense he claimed wasn't real. Mara gave him nothing. Later that night, Ryan came downstairs for water. He paused in the hallway when he heard Travis's voice through the barely cracked patio door, back turned, pacing like a man pretending to have a plan. "Yeah, I'm at the house now. No, it's easy. She still feels guilty. I'll squeeze a few hundred more out of her. The kid? Soft. Looks up to me already. Ain't gonna be hard. Nah, he don't ask questions. Dumb as a rock, honestly." Silence. Then laughter. "What, you think I'm staying long? Hell no. Once I get what I need, I'm out." Ryan didn't move. Not for a long time. He stood there with the glass of water shaking in his hand, condensation dripping down his wrist. The next morning, Travis was gone. Left behind a cigarette, but on the porch, a half-eaten box of pizza on the counter, and a smell in the air like moldy sweat and secondhand lies. Ryan didn't ask where he went. Mara didn't offer. She just looked at him across the breakfast table and saw it in his eyes. Something had cracked. "I guess he had stuff to do," Ryan muttered, staring into his cereal. Mara didn't correct him. But that night, she found the batting cage dismantled. Poles unscrewed, net folded, like it had never been used. The only thing left was Mark's old glove, still hanging on the peg by the garage door. Ryan didn't touch it. He walked past it like it didn't exist. Only now it did. It loomed. Because now he knew. He hadn't swapped one dad for another. He'd traded a lighthouse for a matchstick. And it had already burned out. It started small, like most things that end up cutting deep. Mrs. Eldridge, the 80-year-old neighbor with binoculars practically fused to her face, asked Ryan one morning while he was taking out the trash, "Is Mark all right?" "Haven't seen him around." Ryan mumbled something about him traveling, eyes glued to the recycling bin like it could swallow him whole. She nodded, lips pressed tight, then shuffled back inside, curtains twitching behind her as he turned away. The next week, at the grocery store, Mara ran into Dennis from 2 blocks down. Mark used to help him with his sprinkler lines every spring. "Hey," Dennis said, his cart squeaking. "Tell Mark thanks again for that lawn cedar tip. Saved me a fortune last season." "He's still around." Mara hesitated. "He's taking time for himself." Dennis frowned. Didn't think he was the me-time type." He wasn't. That was the problem. The whispers grew legs. At church, a woman asked if Ryan was doing okay without his father. Not stepfather. Just father. At the diner, Mark's old breakfast order, black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast no butter, stopped being made. The waitress, Carla, used to have it out for him before he even walked in the door. Mrs. Sarcasm, she told another waitress. Always tip 30%, even when his eggs came out cold. Ryan's baseball coach, Coach Callahan, pulled him aside after practice one evening. What was left of it? Anyway, Ryan hadn't shown up in weeks, and when he did, he moved like a shadow pretending to be a boy. Look, Callahan said, handing him a scuffed ball. I don't know what's going on at home, but I'll tell you this. You were locked in when Mark was in those bleachers. Focused. Disciplined. That man gave a damn. And you knew it. Ryan looked down at the ball. Didn't say anything. Kid, you gotta ask yourself, Callahan continued, who's gonna be proud of this version of you? That hit harder than he expected. The next day, Ryan cut fourth period and got caught vaping behind the maintenance shed with a kid named Luke who once punched a fire alarm, just to see if it worked. Ryan had never even held a cigarette before. But now he didn't care if people saw the spiral, because they were already watching it. His teachers emailed home, grades plummeting, participation non-existent. His English teacher wrote, Ryan stopped turning in assignments entirely. He looks distant. And distant was the right word. Not angry, not rebellious, just not there. Mara found him in the garage one evening, sitting on a folding chair, facing the workbench. He was just staring at it, like something was supposed to appear. Like Mark might suddenly walk in with a drill and a dad joke and make it all make sense again. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer, just kept staring. On the wall above the bench hung a single nail. Empty. The wooden plaque that once held Mark's old coaching whistle used to be there. Mark took it with him, not out of spite, but because no one else had earned the right to keep it. Later that night, Mara overheard two other parents whispering in the stands during a school fundraiser. Shame what happened. He raised that boy like his own. She let him walk away. And for what? A ghost of a man. Mara pretended not to hear. But Ryan heard worse. He heard everyone. At the gas station. At the field. At the hardware store where Mark used to buy mulch by the ton for the backyard projects no one appreciated until they crumbled. And with every glance, every lowered voice, every, did you hear, the hole inside him grew colder. Because guilt wasn't loud. It was quiet. It settled in your bones. And it stayed. It was almost midnight when the dam finally broke. Ryan came home from school silent, again. Shoes thudded against the wall. Backpack slung across the dining room chair. No words. No eye contact. Just the sound of a spoon clinking against a cereal bowl he didn't want. Mara watched from the kitchen, arms folded, mug untouched. She'd tried asking about his day 3 times this week. No answers. Not even a shrug anymore. Just that hollow-eyed silence. Until she made the mistake of saying, too softly, you know, if you ever want to talk. I am talking. Ryan exploded, flipping the bowl across the table. Milk splattered across unpaid bills and a stack of unopened college brochures Mara had been too afraid to show him. You just don't listen. Ryan, I want him back, he roared, voice cracking somewhere between rage and heartbreak. I want Mark back. I don't care what you said or what you thought was best. He was my dad, not that drunk loser you tried to replace him with. Mara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her eyes welled up instantly. I didn't try to replace him, Ree. I thought you wanted. I was a kid. I didn't know what the hell I wanted. He was pacing now, hands in his hair. But I knew he'd never leave unless someone pushed him. And you did. You let him walk like he didn't matter. Like he didn't build this entire damn family. Mara collapsed into the nearest chair. Her breath came in gasps, like her lungs had forgotten how to function. You think I don't know that? I wake up every morning and expect to hear him humming while the coffee brews. I still check for his stupid slippers next to the bed. I know what I did. Ryan stood frozen, fists shaking at his sides, eyes wide, scared of what had just come out of him, and terrified of how much of it was true. Then, almost in unison, they reached for their phones. Mara dialed first. The speaker rang once, twice. You've reached Mark. Leave a message. She hung up, shaking, hands damp. Ryan grabbed his phone, stared at the contact labeled Just Dad, thumb hovering. He called. Voicemail. He left a message. Mark, it's me. I want to talk. Please. Then another. Then Mara left one. Then another from Ryan. Then 3 more. One was just breathing. One was just sobbing. By 2 a.m., they'd left 17 voicemails between them. Please. Apologies. Begging. Confessions neither of them had made even to themselves before tonight. Mark, I didn't mean it, Ryan said in the sixth. When I asked about him, about my bio dad, it wasn't because I didn't love you. I was confused. And dumb. And now I can't breathe right without you here. Mara's ninth was a whisper through tears. You were right. About everything. The house is falling apart. The kid is falling apart. And I am too. I was just too proud to say it until now. They sat side by side on the floor afterward, backs against the kitchen cabinets, feet numb, faces red. The clock ticked. The silence was deafening. Then the phone buzzed. Both of them jolted upright. A text. But not from Mark. Spam. Congratulations. You've been pre-approved for a... Mara dropped the phone. Ryan curled up, forehead on his knees. The voicemail line had become a graveyard for apologies too late. Because Mark wasn't ignoring them. He had simply evolved beyond them. And once a man like that moves on, he doesn't look back. By early spring, the deck was done. Mark had rebuilt it from the foundation up. New planks, sanded smooth, treated with cedar oil he'd bartered from the hardware store owner for fixing a busted backup generator. Every nail sunk into that what felt like a quiet punctuation mark at the end of an old sentence. He'd ripped out the rotted pieces himself. No gloves. Just hands, sweat, and resolve. The trout smoking came next. He'd never done it before. Just something he read about in an old outdoor manual he found tucked behind a broken cabinet. Took him 3 tries to get it right. The first batch came out tasting like rubber tires. The second turned into mush. But the third? The third was perfect, smoky, delicate, flaky, seasoned just enough to make him wonder why the hell he hadn't started doing this 30 years ago. He ate it with black coffee and scrambled eggs each morning. Quiet, deliberate, like a ritual. And the sketchbook, God, the sketchbook. He used to draw years ago, back before life got busy with baseball practices and clogged gutters, and, can you pick up almond milk on your way home? Requests. Now, every night by the fire, he filled page after page. Trees. Mountains. A fox he saw once that stared at him like it knew his entire story. One page had a silhouette of a boy holding a bat, back turned, staring up at stadium lights. He didn't sign that one. Most evenings he'd wander into town, down to a small diner called Rosie's, named after the original owner's dog, not the owner herself, who insisted on being called Mrs. J and never smiled unless you made her laugh without trying. But Kendra, the new waitress, 20 years his junior with a tattoo of a paper crane on her wrist and a warm way of saying Mark like she'd known it all her life. She talked to him like he wasn't half a ghost. You always sit in the same booth, she said once, topping off his coffee. I like routine. You like hiding, she replied, smirking. He smiled at that. First real smile in months. It creased his face in a way that reminded him he was still alive. She didn't ask about his past. She didn't need to. The lines around his eyes told enough of the story. And he didn't volunteer much, just that he was retired, had some free time, and was learning to do things slower. One morning, just after sunrise, he sat on the new deck with a mug of hot coffee, wrapped in an old hoodie, listening to the wind move through the pine. His phone, silent all night, buzzed once. Then again. He didn't look. He didn't need to. By now, the call display was muscle memory. Mara. Ryan. Home. He let it vibrate until it stopped. Then turned the phone off completely, set it upside down on the table, and went back to sketching a trout mid-leap from water. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was earned. Because peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it's forged, like steel. Sometimes it's what happens when you stop letting people shape you like clay. And for the first time in years, Mark wasn't performing. He wasn't proving. He was just being. And while the world he left behind crumbled under the weight of regret, he built a new one from the ashes. Alone. Solid. Untouched. The letter came folded in thirds, sealed in a plain white envelope, addressed in shaky, uncertain block letters. Mark H. P.O. Box 72. Spruce Hollow, CO. It sat in the mailbox for 3 days before Mark picked it up. He only checked the box when he needed to, usually once a week. Bills mostly. Catalogs he never ordered. A few ads from the local lumberyard. But this one stood out. No return address. No stamp either. It had been hand-delivered. Small-town postmaster must have recognized the name and tossed it in the box out of courtesy. Everyone knew everyone up here. Everyone also knew better than to ask Mark questions. He held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Something about the pressure of the paper, the way the ink bled just slightly in places, already told him what it was. Inside, one page, torn from a school notebook. Faint blue lines. The handwriting wasn't perfect, slanted, some words pressed down too hard. But he'd have known it anywhere. Mark, you were always my father. I don't know why I didn't see it before. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want it to be true because it hurt too much knowing I failed you. I was stupid. I let the wrong man in and pushed the right one out. You never raised your voice. You never left until I gave you a reason to. I know it's probably too late, but I had to say it. Please come home. Ryan. Mark read it once. Then again. Then slowly, deliberately, a third time. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He didn't mutter anything about forgiveness or second chances. He just sat in the wooden chair by the fireplace, letter resting in one hand, the other absently stroking the bark-smooth armrest he'd carved months ago. Outside, the wind was soft, the kind of evening hush that made pine needles hum. He looked toward the window, the same one he always stared through during storms. Snow still clung to the ridge beyond the creek. A deer grazed quietly at the edge of the trees, unaware, or maybe uncaring, that it was being watched. After a long moment, Mark leaned forward and fed the letter to the fire. It caught quickly, curling at the corners like it was relieved to disappear. He watched the flames fold the words into ash. The sentence, "Please come home," burned last, the ink crackling into dust. He stood, stretched his back, and poured himself a mug of strong black coffee. Not whiskey, not wine. Coffee. Ground that morning. Hot, bitter, grounding. Then he stepped outside, sat on the rebuilt deck, and watched the stars come out, one by one, until the sky felt full again. Because some things don't get fixed. Some doors, once closed, don't creak back open. Some fathers stop chasing the echo of their name. And that night, Ryan's apology didn't fall on deaf ears. It fell on a man who had already forgiven, but moved on anyway. The last time Mara had been in that grocery store with Mark, he'd made a scene in the produce section. Nothing dramatic, just that low-level kind of scene only someone who knew him could detect. A quiet debate with the butcher about why no one in Oregon seemed to understand how to properly trim a rack of lamb. She'd laughed then, told him to stop acting like a New Yorker. He replied, "I'm not acting." Now, 6 months later, she stood frozen in aisle 4 with Ryan beside her, staring at the man who used to argue about lamb fat like it mattered. Mark. He looked different. Not younger. Not older. Just clearer. Like whatever weight had once pressed between his shoulders had lifted and evaporated into the cold Colorado air he now called home. He wore a flannel shirt tucked in too neatly, jeans without a crease, boots that actually looked worn for once. His cart had a few practical things: canned beans, almonds, a newspaper, a thermos. No distractions. No junk. No chaos. Mara spotted him first. The breath left her lungs so fast, she almost dropped the carton of eggs in her hand. Ryan, eyes buried in his phone, didn't see him until he looked up at her reaction. Then his phone slipped from his grip. Mark saw them. That much was certain. He glanced up. No flicker of surprise. Just a brief pause, like spotting a vaguely familiar painting you no longer liked. He nodded. Polite. Civil. Distant. And then, he turned and walked past them. No words. No hand on Ryan's shoulder. No clenched jaw. No, I told you so. Just silence. Ryan's lips parted, and something fragile cracked in his chest. Dad. It came out like a ghost of a name. A word wrapped in guilt and time, and the kind of love that shows up far too late. Mark didn't stop. Didn't turn. Just kept walking. The wheels of his cart squeaked once, then faded into the hum of the fluorescent lights above aisle 5. Bulk grains and quiet exits. Ryan stood there, motionless, lips trembling. That one word, Dad, still floating somewhere in the refrigerated air. Mara reached for him, hesitated, then lowered her hand. Nothing she could say would fill that gap. Nothing could glue back what they'd shattered. They checked out in silence. Outside, in the parking lot, the sun was low. Everything glowed gold, but nothing felt warm. As they loaded their bags into the trunk, Ryan finally spoke. "He's never coming back, is he?" Mara didn't lie. "No." And that was it. Mark returned to Colorado later that afternoon. Paperwork filed. Signatures made. The house, his house, officially transferred, wiped clean from his name. He didn't drive by it. Didn't check the mailbox. Didn't even glance at the street sign. Just did what he came to do. And vanished again. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because forgetting is its own form of justice. And for Mara and Ryan, there would be no grand confrontation, no final blow-up, no dramatic closure. Just a man with steady hands and no more questions. A silence so heavy, it said everything.
The moment Vanessa's words left her mouth, the room exploded with laughter. Her mother cackled, her sister smirked, and even her uncle, the one who barely spoke at these gatherings, let out a chuckle. Vanessa basked in their amusement, lifting her wine glass like she had just delivered the toast of the century. "I control all his money, so he'll never leave," she declared, smirking in my direction. I sat there, hands wrapped around my beer bottle, face blank. Let them laugh. Let them enjoy their little moment. I glanced around the room, taking in every reaction. Her mother, Beverly, wiped tears from her eyes as she giggled like a teenager. Her sister, Julia, leaned in, shaking her head with a knowing smirk, as if to say, "Men are so stupid." The rest of her relatives just chuckled along, oblivious, entertained, delighted by Vanessa's audacity. They truly believed I was trapped. I felt the heat of the fireplace at my back, the low hum of conversation filling the space as people moved on to other topics. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon lingered in the air. The annual family gathering at Vanessa's parents' house was always the same. Too much food, too much wine, and too many people talking over each other. And yet, this year everything was different, because I knew something they didn't. I took a sip of my beer, forcing a smile when Vanessa turned to me with that smug look, the one she always gave when she thought she had one. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Face it, babe," she purred, fingers grazing my arm. "You're stuck with me." I met her gaze, slow and steady, letting the silence stretch. She had no idea. For 6 months, I had been planning my exit. For 6 months, I had watched her drain our accounts, swipe my cards like they were hers to burn, lie straight to my face about where the money was going. For 6 months, I had smiled and nodded, letting her think she was untouchable. She thought she had me under her thumb. She thought she had control. What she didn't know was that every dollar she spent, every financial move she made, I had been tracking. The expensive spa weekends, the emergency shopping sprees, the shady little Venmo transfers that she thought I wouldn't notice. I saw it all, and I let her do it. I let her dig her hole deeper and deeper, all while I quietly moved my money into accounts she couldn't touch. She thought I was an idiot. She thought I didn't care. She thought I didn't notice when she started treating me like a walking ATM instead of a husband. But I noticed, and soon, very soon, she was going to realize just how wrong she was. Because in exactly 1 week, her perfect little world was going to shatter. 1 week from today, she would wake up and find that every single bank account she had access to was empty. 1 week from today, her cards would decline at the register. 1 week from today, she would call the bank, only to be told that she was no longer authorized on my accounts. 1 week from today, she would come home to an empty house, divorce papers on the counter, and nothing left in her name but the pile of debt she so eagerly built. And me? I'd be long gone. So I let them laugh. I let them enjoy their joke. Because in 7 days, Vanessa wouldn't be laughing anymore. A week. That's all the time that separated Vanessa's smug little world from complete destruction. I spent the next few days playing my role to perfection. The quiet, clueless husband. The man who didn't know where his own money went. The fool who let his wife run the finances because, let's face it, he'd be lost without her. She didn't suspect a thing. On Monday morning, she kissed my cheek before I left for work, humming to herself like she always did when she felt victorious. I could practically hear her thoughts. He's mine. His money is mine. He'll never leave. On Tuesday, she sent me a casual text about needing to go on a girls' trip next month. Just a little getaway. Babe, nothing crazy. Translation. She wanted another fully funded shopping spree disguised as a vacation. I sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Let her think it's all good. On Wednesday, she ordered 3 designer handbags, 3, and tried to hide the email confirmation. I saw it before she could delete it. The total? Over $6,000. Vanessa didn't buy things because she needed them. She bought them because she could, because she thought I'd never stop her. By Thursday, I had double-checked every single transfer I'd made. Every dollar, every investment, every asset, secured, locked down. And by Friday, everything was set. The trap was in place. Vanessa didn't know it, but at exactly 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, every joint account we shared would be closed. Every card she had access to would be dead. Every allowance she so generously gave herself from my money would be gone. And Saturday was when it all went to hell. I woke up to screaming. Nathan! My phone vibrated on the nightstand, but I ignored it. I already knew what the text said. The same ones she was probably sending over and over again. Why is my card declined? Did you forget to transfer money? WTF is going on? She tried calling next. Once, twice, 3 times. I let it ring. I wasn't home. I had checked into a hotel late last night, hours before everything went live. I wanted a front row seat to the chaos, but from a very safe distance. I imagined it perfectly. Vanessa at the grocery store, a cart full of overpriced nonsense, swiping her card once, then twice, then a third time, her face twisting with confusion as the cashier gave her that awkward, "Ma'am, it's been declined" look. She would have tried another card, then another, all dead. She would have fumbled for her phone, calling the bank in frustration, only to be told, in the politest way possible, that she no longer had access to my accounts. I almost wished I could have seen it. The realization, the moment her brain caught up to reality. She had nothing, no access, no control, no money, and for the first time in our entire marriage, she had no power over me. The phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. Nathan, answer me. What did you do? I smiled. Oh, Vanessa, you're about to find out. I waited. The hotel room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner, the curtains drawn just enough to let in the dull morning light. My phone was still vibrating every few minutes. Calls, texts, voicemails piling up like desperate cries from a woman who had just realized her world was crumbling. I took my time. I ordered breakfast, black coffee, eggs, toast. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, knowing that somewhere across town, Vanessa was losing her mind. And then, right on cue, bang, 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 a fist pounded against my hotel door. I took another sip of coffee. Nathan, open this damn door. There she was. I could hear her breathing, heavy and ragged. Could practically see her standing there in her designer workout clothes. Hair a mess, face twisted in rage. I let her knock. Bang, bang, bang. Nathan, I swear to God, open this door or I'll. I opened it. She stumbled forward, caught off guard, her breath hitching. And then I saw it, the wild, desperate look in her eyes. The panic, the disbelief. The "how dare you do this to me" rage simmering beneath her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Calm, silent, unshaken. She, on the other hand, looked like a woman unraveling. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Her chest rose and fell like she had just sprinted up the hotel stairs instead of taking the elevator. Her lips trembled before she forced them into a sneer. You think this is funny? She hissed. I tilted my head slightly. I don't know what you mean. Her nostrils flared. My cards. My accounts. What did you do? I let a slow smile creep onto my face. Ah, I said, as if I had just now realized what she was talking about. You mean my accounts? Her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. Don't play dumb with me, Nathan. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the hotel room. By all means, come in. Let's talk. She stormed past me, heels clicking against the carpet, arms folded tight across her chest. I closed the door. She spun around, eyes blazing. Fix this. Now. I raised an eyebrow. Fix what, Vanessa? She let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through her hair. Oh, cut the crap. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I tried to buy groceries this morning. Declined. I tried to book my spa appointment. Declined. I called the bank. And do you know what they told me? I waited. Her hands balled into fists. They said I'm no longer authorized on any of the accounts. She snapped. Any of them, Nathan? You cut me off. I exhaled, slow and steady. I did warn you, Vanessa. She blinked. What? I stepped closer, just enough to watch the flicker of unease cross her face. That night at your parents' house, I said quietly. When you stood there and laughed in my face. When you told your entire family that you controlled me. That I'd never leave because I couldn't. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I smiled, slow and deliberate. You should have been more careful with your words. She shook her head. You're serious? You're actually, Nathan. Do you even understand what you've done? I nodded. Oh, I understand perfectly. Her voice rose, shrill and panicked. You think you can just cut me off like that? After everything. After all these years. I have nothing now. I let her words hang in the air. Then, I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped a few buttons, and held it up for her to see. The screen displayed an email, an official notice confirming the submission of divorce papers. Her breath hitched, her face drained of color, and for the first time since I had known her, Vanessa looked afraid. Vanessa's eyes locked onto the phone screen like it was a live grenade about to go off in her hands. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't have a smug comeback or a snide remark. Her face paled, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. I let the silence stretch, watching as the reality of the situation sank into her thick, entitled skull. Finally, she managed to choke out, You filed for divorce? I nodded. Last week. Should be finalized soon enough. Her breath hitched. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process words she had never expected to hear. Divorce? No, no, no. That wasn't part of the plan. Vanessa had spent years building this little empire of control, weaving a web of financial manipulation so tight that she truly believed I had no way out. She thought she had won. She thought I was hers forever. And now, in one swift move, I had ripped that power right out of her greedy little hands. Why, you're joking, she stammered, her voice suddenly weaker. Nathan, this isn't funny. I let out a breath, calm and collected. Do I look like I'm joking? She took a step back, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. No, no, no. You can't do this. She forced out a laugh, but it was hollow, desperate. You don't even know how to handle your own money. Nathan, you need me. Cocked my head. That's funny, I said coolly, because I seem to have handled this situation just fine. Her expression twisted. You blindsided me. This isn't fair. I let out a low chuckle. Fair, I repeated. Vanessa, do you really want to talk about fairness? Her lips pressed together, the panic in her eyes shifting to something sharper. She was scrambling now, reaching for anything, any leverage she thought she still had. Her voice dropped into that sickeningly sweet, manipulative tone she always used when she wanted something. Baby, listen, we don't have to do this. I know I said some things, but it was just a joke. You know how my family is, we were just messing around. You're overreacting. I smiled. You weren't joking when you maxed out my credit cards. She flinched. I took a slow step forward, enjoying the way she instinctively backed up. You weren't joking when you funneled money into that secret account you thought I didn't know about, I continued. Her eyes widened. You weren't joking when you spent $6,000 on handbags this week alone, I added, tilting my head. And you definitely weren't joking when you told your family I was too weak to leave you. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing, absolutely nothing. Her control was slipping through her fingers like sand, and she knew it. You can't just leave me with nothing, she finally spat, her voice shaking. That's not how marriage works, Nathan. I inhaled deeply, let out a slow breath, and met her gaze. Then maybe, I said, my voice low and deliberate, you should have treated me like a husband instead of a paycheck. Her face twisted in rage. You selfish bastard, she shrieked. You owe me. After everything I've done for you, you think you can just walk away. I built this life with you. You deserve nothing. I cut in sharply. She froze. I stepped even closer, close enough to see the flicker of fear in her eyes. Everything you had, I said quietly, came from me. The house? Mine. The cars? Mine. The money you blew through like it was Monopoly cash? Mine. Her breath hitched. And now, I added, my voice steady, so are the consequences. Vanessa was unraveling right in front of me, and I had never seen anything more satisfying. She had spent years chipping away at my dignity, mocking me, controlling me, making me believe that I needed her. But in the end, she was nothing without me, and she finally knew it. Vanessa's breath came in short, shallow gasps, her chest rising and falling as the weight of reality crushed down on her. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. This wasn't a temporary fight she could manipulate her way out of. This was checkmate, and she knew it. Her hands trembled as she pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me, her expression contorted with rage. You can't do this to me, Nathan. I gave up everything for this marriage. I scoffed. Everything, I repeated, stepping closer. What exactly did you give up, Vanessa? A 9-to-5 job you hated? Paying for your own bills? What? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You didn't sacrifice a damn thing. I continued, my voice low and measured. You took, and you took, and you took, until there was nothing left. Her lips trembled, and for a split second, I thought I saw something close to realization in her eyes. But just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by something uglier. Vanessa wasn't the type to admit defeat. No, she was the type to fight dirty. Her jaw clenched, her shoulders squared, and just like that, she flipped the switch. Fine, she sneered, her tone dripping with venom. You want to be a petty little bastard? You want to humiliate me? Go ahead, Nathan. But let me remind you of something. She took a step forward, tilting her head. Divorce or not, I'm still your wife. And in this state, that means I get half. She said it like a weapon, like she had just pulled the pin on a grenade and tossed it at my feet. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I exhaled, slow and controlled. You really think I didn't plan for that? The smirk on her face faltered. I let the silence stretch before pulling out my phone again, tapping a few buttons, and turning the screen toward her. It was a scanned copy of our prenup. Signed, notarized, ironclad. Vanessa's eyes darted across the document, her pupils dilating as she reached the relevant section. Her lips moved slightly, whispering the words to herself like they were written in a foreign language. In the event of divorce, assets accumulated by each party prior to and during the marriage remain solely in the possession of the individual owner. There will be no division of financial assets, properties, or investments unless specifically agreed upon by both parties in a separate contractual agreement. Her face drained of color. I crossed my arms. You really should have read the fine print, sweetheart. She gaped at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, the frantic attempt to find some loophole, some way to claw her way back into the life she had leeched off for years. You tricked me into signing this, she whispered. I chuckled.
No, Vanessa.
You were too busy picking out a designer wedding dress to bother reading it. She swallowed hard. This is bullshit. My lawyer will. Your lawyer. I cut in smoothly. You mean the one you don't have? The one you can't afford? Because, in case you forgot, you don't have any money. Her breath hitched. And since all those joint accounts were technically funded by my income, and you never contributed a dime, guess what that means? I smiled coldly. Legally, that money was never yours to begin with. A strangled sound left her throat. This was it. The moment she realized she had lost. She had spent years treating me like an idiot, like a walking, breathing bank account, like a prisoner in my own marriage. And now she was the one left with nothing. Vanessa stumbled back, gripping the edge of the hotel desk like her legs might give out. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice raw, desperate. "Please, we can talk about this." I shook my head. "We're done talking." She inhaled sharply. "But," I held up a hand. "One more thing," I said, cutting her off. "Before you start trying to crawl your way back, let me make something very clear." I stepped forward, my voice low and sharp. "You will not harass me. You will not stalk me. You will not come banging on my door in the middle of the night, screaming about what's fair and what you deserve. Because let me tell you something, Vanessa. If you try anything, I will drag your name through the courts so fast you won't have 2 pennies to rub together when I'm done." Tears welled in her eyes. "Nathan, please." I stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled. "Goodbye, Vanessa." And with that, I turned, walked to the door, and left her standing there in the ruins of her own greed. The moment I stepped out of the hotel room, a wave of something I hadn't felt in years hit me. Relief. I didn't rush. I didn't slam the door. I simply walked down the hallway, calm and steady, leaving Vanessa behind in the mess she created. Her voice didn't follow me. No more screaming. No more demands. No more threats. She knew. She knew she had nothing left to fight with. I pressed the elevator button and glanced at my phone. More missed calls, more texts. But not just from Vanessa. Her mother, her sister, a couple of her friends, or more accurately, the leeches she funded with my money. Vanessa's mom. "Beverly, what did you do to my daughter? Call me now." Vanessa's sister. "Julia, you can't just leave her like this." Nathan. Unknown number. "You're an evil bastard. She loved you." I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. They weren't concerned about Vanessa. Not really. They were worried about what she could no longer give them. My money, my stability, the cushy little lifestyle she had used to buy their loyalty. It was all gone. Ding. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside, enjoying the absolute silence around me. For the first time in years, I felt light. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. Right about now, Vanessa was probably still standing in that hotel room, staring at the divorce papers, trying to piece together the remains of a life that had been built on lies. And me? I had a plane to catch. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. By the time I landed, my phone had finally gone quiet. No more texts. No more calls. Just silence. Perfect. I grabbed my bag from the overhead compartment, stepped off the plane, and took my first breath of fresh air as a free man. My car was waiting in the parking garage. My car. Not the overpriced one Vanessa had demanded I lease for her. No, I had taken the smart route and kept something practical. Something reliable. Something in my name. I slid into the driver's seat and exhaled. The road stretched ahead of me, open and endless. For the first time in my life, I had no obligations. No nagging demands. No one draining my accounts behind my back. No one telling me I was too stupid to handle my own money. I started the engine, rolling down the windows as the cool breeze rushed in. Then, without a single glance back, I drove forward. Vanessa could scream. She could cry. She could curse my name. But it didn't matter, because I was done. As I merged onto the highway, the city shrinking behind me, I felt something I hadn't in years. Pure, unfiltered freedom. No weight on my shoulders. No one waiting at home to criticize my every move. No more Vanessa. The road stretched ahead, wide and open, and for the first time in a long time, my future belonged to me. I reached over, turning up the volume on the radio. Some classic rock station blasted through the speakers, the kind of music Vanessa always complained about. Ugh, do we have to listen to this? It's so outdated. Not anymore. I smirked, letting the song play as I drove, the wind whipping through the open windows. The air smelled clean, crisp, like fresh possibilities. Then my phone buzzed again. I sighed, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to pick up. I hit the answer button, keeping my voice calm. Yeah. For a second, there was just breathing. Then, "You think this is over?" I recognized that voice instantly. Vanessa. I didn't respond, just let the silence stretch, waiting. You think you can just walk away from me? She hissed, her voice raw, furious. You think you can just ruin my life and drive off like none of it ever happened? I let out a slow breath. Vanessa, I don't think I know. Her breath hitched. You smug son of a... She cut herself off, sucking in air like she was trying to calm down. But she couldn't. Not now. Not after what I'd done. You have no idea what you've started, she seethed. You think I'm just gonna roll over and accept this? You think you're untouchable? I didn't answer, because honestly, I didn't care. She could scream. She could threaten. She could throw a tantrum like a spoiled child who had just been told no for the first time in her life. But the reality was, she had nothing. No money, no power, no control. Just blind, desperate anger. Nathan, I swear to God, she growled. I will make you pay for this. I sighed, rubbing my temple. Vanessa, you already did. She went dead silent. I smirked. For years, actually. But hey, hope those designer bags were worth it. Then, before she could spew another word of poison, I hung up. The second the call ended, I blocked her number. Then I blocked her mother, her sister, all of them. Every leech, every enabler, everyone who had ever stood by and laughed while she tore me down. I deleted their numbers and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. For the first time in a long time, there was peace. Just the road, the wind, the music, and me. And the best part? There wasn't a damn thing Vanessa could do about it. The weight of Vanessa's last words lingered for only a second before I let them drift away like dust in the wind. She was powerless now. For years, she had played the role of a queen, sitting atop a throne built with my money, my success, and my trust. She thought she had me wrapped so tightly around her finger that I'd never dare to pull away. But now, she was just another bitter, desperate woman with nothing left to hold on to. I pressed down on the gas, letting the engine roar as I sped down the highway, watching the last remnants of my old life fade into the distance. Vanessa could scream, threaten, and throw tantrums all she wanted. She could claw at the ruins of the life she destroyed. But none of it mattered anymore, because I had done something she never thought possible. I left, and I wasn't looking back. 3 days passed. I checked into a small beachside resort, somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the city where Vanessa's tantrums couldn't reach me. The air was warm, the scent of salt and freedom clinging to every breeze. I spent the days with my phone switched off, reading, swimming, drinking good whiskey, things I hadn't let myself enjoy in years.
No nagging. No passive-aggressive sais.
No one telling me I was wasting money on things I worked for. Just peace. Then, on the 4th morning, I decided to check my phone. I scrolled past the endless missed calls and texts from numbers I no longer cared about. Then something caught my eye. An email. From my lawyer. Subject: Urgent Financial Discovery Update. I opened it, scanning the words, my calm morning instantly darkening. Nathan, we found something. My stomach clenched. My lawyer had been working through every financial detail of my case, making sure there were no loose ends. But apparently, there was one thing I hadn't accounted for. Vanessa took out loans in your name. I froze. Several, actually. High-interest personal loans, credit lines. She's been funneling money for months. Quietly, behind your back. The total? Well into 6 figures. A slow, seething burn crawled up my spine. That conniving, greedy, shameless woman. She knew what she was doing. She knew I was catching on to her, knew that her golden goose was slipping away, so she made sure that when the time came, I'd still be on the hook. I clenched my jaw, breathing deeply through my nose. It wasn't over. She wasn't just going to let me go. No, Vanessa was going to try to drag me down with her. She thought she had played her last card. She thought she could trap me one last time. But she had no idea what was coming next. I stared at the email, my jaw tightening as the words burned into my brain. 6 figures. Vanessa had been setting this up for months. Probably since the moment she first realized I wasn't the fool she took me for. She must have forged my signatures, lied to banks, manipulated records. She was desperate, and desperate people do reckless things. For a moment, I let the anger sink in, deep and sharp. The betrayal should have shocked me, but it didn't. No, this was just Vanessa being Vanessa. A parasite clinging on, refusing to let go. But she had made a mistake. A big one. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to relax. Then I typed a response to my lawyer. We fight this. Everything. Find out how she did it, who approved it, and make sure not a single dollar falls on me. If she committed fraud, I want her in court so fast she won't know what hit her. I hit send. Then, for good measure, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer directly. Tell me exactly what we're dealing with, I said the moment he answered. He exhaled. It's bad, Nathan, but not impossible. She took out multiple personal loans under your name, banks, online lenders, even a damn payday loan service. But here's the thing. I waited, gripping the edge of the table. What? There are inconsistencies. A lot of them. Some of the applications have 2 different signatures, and others list employment details that don't match your actual records. It means she forged them. I finished, my voice ice cold. Exactly. I felt something dangerous simmering in my chest. Vanessa had played her little game for years, manipulating, stealing, controlling. But this time, she had crossed into criminal territory. Start the fraud report, I said. Get in touch with every single lender and make it clear this was done without my consent. If they push back, we push harder. Understood, my lawyer said. Also, one more thing, you're going to want to keep an eye on her. If she's this desperate, she might not stop at just financial fraud. I smirked, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I count on it, I muttered. I hung up, staring out at the ocean, my grip still tight around the phone. Vanessa thought she had me. She thought she could pull one last scam, leave me drowning in debt while she played the victim. But what she didn't realize was that she hadn't just made a mistake. She had sealed her own fate. And now, I was going to make sure she paid for every last bit of it. I leaned back in my chair, fingers drumming against the table, my mind already 3 steps ahead. Vanessa had crossed the line from manipulative to criminal. She wasn't just some bitter ex-wife trying to hold onto the scraps of a broken marriage. She was a con artist who thought she could keep the upper hand even after I left her in the dust. But she underestimated me. For years, I let her believe she was the smarter one, the one in control, the one who could do whatever she wanted and never face the consequences. She had no idea what was coming next. I pulled up my laptop and got to work. Step 1. Absolute financial lockdown. I sent emails to my banks, my investment brokers, and every financial institution I had a connection with. Vanessa had already stolen enough. She wouldn't get another cent. Not by fraud, not by legal loopholes, not by anything. Every remaining account was double secured. New passwords, new authentication methods, locked down so tight even the damn Pentagon would struggle to crack them. Step 2. Public exposure. Vanessa thrived on appearances. Her whole existence revolved around how people saw her. Glamorous, successful, a woman who had it all. She built an empire of lies, feeding off the admiration and wallets of others. Time to burn it to the ground. I drafted a message to our mutual acquaintances. Polite, professional, but cutting like a knife. Due to recent discoveries regarding financial fraud committed in my name, I've had to take legal action against Vanessa. If you've conducted any financial dealings with her, I suggest you check your records immediately. Short, simple, devastating. With one click, I sent it out. By the time Vanessa saw it, the damage would already be done. Her little social circle, the friends who used to laugh at my expense, would turn on her the second they realized the real joke had been on them all along. Step 3. Legal destruction. I called my lawyer again. Push everything forward, I said. The fraud case, the divorce, the asset recovery, everything. There was a pause. Then, Nathan, you do realize if she's convicted of financial fraud, she could go to jail for this, right? I smirked. Good. Vanessa thought she could set traps and walk away unscathed. But she forgot something very important. The man she thought was weak had just outplayed her at every turn. And now, she was the one trapped. The fallout happened faster than even I expected. By the time Vanessa realized what had hit her, it was already too late. The bank fraud investigation moved quickly. Turns out, Lenders don't take kindly to identity theft. Within days, my lawyer sent me confirmation that multiple institutions had flagged her applications as fraudulent. And the best part? The police were involved now. Vanessa, in her arrogance, had assumed she could fake my signatures and fabricate employment records without facing any real consequences. But she forgot one simple truth. Banks don't lose money without demanding someone pay the price. And since I had airtight proof that none of those loans were mine, that someone was her. The first time Vanessa called me after the fraud report went through, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She was sobbing, her voice raw with panic. "Nathan, please, you have to fix this. They're saying I could be arrested. Do you understand what that means?" I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunset from my beachside balcony, the cool breeze washing over me. "You mean," I said slowly, "consequences?" "Yeah, Vanessa, I know what those are." She let out a choked breath. "Nathan, please, I was desperate. You just left me with nothing. What was I supposed to do?" I tilted my head. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe not commit a felony?" She made a strangled noise, somewhere between a sob and a furious growl. "You don't get it. I could go to prison." I sighed. "Yeah, that is what happens when you break federal laws." Silence. Then, her voice dropped, shifting from desperation to something darker. "You did this to me." I laughed.
No, Vanessa.
"You did this to yourself." Another beat of silence. Then, in a last, pathetic attempt to cling to something, she whispered, "You still love me, don't you?" I exhaled through my nose, closing my eyes for a second. Then I said the words that finally ended everything. "Vanessa, I never loved you. I loved the person I thought you were." A sharp, wounded breath. Then click. She hung up, and that was the last time I ever heard her voice. 3 weeks later, the last legal hurdles were cleared. The fraud case was out of my hands now, fully in the grip of the authorities. Vanessa, she was finished. Her friends had abandoned her. Her family had turned on her. Her perfect, pampered life had crumbled into nothing but overdue bills and legal summons. And me? I was free. I took a deep breath, standing on my new balcony, overlooking the ocean. No more debt. No more lies. No more waking up every day feeling like I was suffocating. For years, Vanessa thought she had control. But in the end, she was just another pathetic con artist who believed her own lies. And I was the man who finally walked away. Not just richer, not just free, but smarter and happier than ever before.
She told me over meatloaf. That's the part one can't shake. Of all the nights, of all the ways, it was Tuesday, and she made meatloaf. Her "sorry it's been a long week" meal, which was ironic since she hadn't been home since Friday. She breezed in wearing that lavender cardigan I bought her 10 years ago in Monterey, poured herself a glass of red, and hummed while setting the table like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't disappeared for 4 straight nights with vague texts and zero explanation. Like the scent on her scarf that wasn't perfume didn't hang in the hallway like a dare. She set the plate in front of me, sat down across the table, folded her hands, and said it. No build-up, no apology, no attempt at softening the blow. "I'm in love with Connor." I didn't respond right away, mostly because I was still chewing. Then she added, "Always have been. You'll never understand us. He's my soulmate." I blinked. Connor. The name hit like a golf ball to the temple. Connor. The stepbrother she barely mentioned for a decade. The man I'd shaken hands with twice, once at her mother's wedding to his dad, and once when he crashed a 4th of July cookout wearing cowboy boots and quoting Bukowski. Connor, who once flirted with our daughter's college roommate and made Melissa roll her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. I stared at her, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard. "Connor, your stepbrother?" She didn't flinch. Didn't even pretend to feel awkward. "We're not blood," she said. Like that made it a TED Talk instead of a confession. "This is destiny." Destiny. That's the word she used, as if screwing your stepbrother in hotel rooms while your husband balances trust accounts for dead clients is just part of some divine blueprint. I didn't shout. I didn't flip the table. I just sat there while the meatloaf got cold. She pushed her wine glass in slow circles on the table and gave me a look that was both pitying and triumphant, like she thought I'd break down, cry, maybe offer her my blessing. I wish I could say I felt some big cinematic heartbreak, but all I felt was static. Cold, dense static behind my eyes. Like my brain was buffering. Connor understands me, she went on, eyes shining like she'd been waiting years to deliver this monologue. With you, I feel like I'm always performing. You don't see me. Not really. That part almost made me laugh. I'd spent the last 15 years making her life so goddamn easy. She didn't even know where our insurance policies were kept. I did everything. The bills, the taxes, the finances, her car maintenance, her stupid yoga retreat bookings. I even managed her mother's prescription refills because Melissa said she couldn't handle the paperwork. She picked up her fork again like it was just another Tuesday. I watched her chew and thought, you really don't think this is going to cost you anything, do you? That was the moment something flipped inside me. Not rage. Not grief. Something smoother. Quieter. A thin, precise click. Like a lock turning. It's not just that she cheated. It's that she expected a standing ovation for it. She kept talking after that. I don't remember the rest. Something about how it's been building for years, and how she felt trapped in our safe little bubble. She used a lot of therapy words she'd picked up from podcasts and half-read books. Authenticity, alignment, emotional honesty. And then she said something that, I think, will echo in my head until the day I die. I think you'll actually be happier without me. You're such a stable man. You don't need chaos. You don't thrive in passion. I looked at her. Really looked. And I realized she had no idea who I was. She thought my silence was passivity. My routines were weakness. My restraint? A lack of fire. She didn't know I'd already written the ending to this story years ago. She didn't know the fuse was already lit. She stood up, kissed me on the forehead like I was her aging uncle, and said, I hope someday you understand this wasn't about hurting you. Then she grabbed her coat and walked out into the night. I sat there a while, letting the silence settle in around the wine glass ring on the table. Then I pushed the plate away, stood up, and walked to the office. I had something to find. She walked in like it was a casual brunch. Light steps, Starbucks in hand, sunglasses perched on her head even though it was cloudy out. Sophie, 22, all grown up and glowing with the kind of unearned confidence that only comes from never having to clean up someone else's mess. I hadn't seen her in weeks, college, boyfriend, work, the usual. When I texted her, asking if she could come by, I thought I might get a glimmer of sanity. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd walk in furious. Maybe she'd yell, demand answers, ask how the hell her mother had ended up in bed with her own step-uncle like we'd suddenly been written into a Tennessee Williams play. But she just strolled in like this was any other family update. She gave me a quick hug and said, so mom told you. That's all. No build-up. No shock. Just so mom told you, like she was referencing a Netflix spoiler. I stood there by the kitchen counter, coffee half-drunk, still in the same clothes I'd worn for 2 days. Sleep hadn't come easily since the meatloaf night. I tried to gauge her tone, her expression, any sign that maybe she was processing this with the appropriate level of revulsion. But her face was soft, almost dreamy. She plopped down on the couch, crossed her legs, and said it with that patronizing, half-pitying tone she picked up in her Psych 101 course. Honestly, Dad, they've always had a special bond. The air left the room. I couldn't even muster a sarcastic quip. I just stared. She smiled like this was some cosmic love story unfolding. Like this was a win for the universe. I mean, think about it, she continued, setting down her coffee. They've always just gotten each other. I used to wonder if something was going on, to be honest. They just had this connection. Maybe it was just meant to happen. Meant to happen. I looked at her, this girl I'd raised, fed, taught how to drive, stayed up with during fevers and heartbreaks, and realized she wasn't standing beside me. She wasn't even in the same room. She was over there with them, clapping at their twisted little love story like it was some kind of triumph over oppression. The oppression, I suppose, being me. I sat down slowly. My knees felt heavier than usual. There was a long silence. Long enough that I hoped she'd feel it. But she didn't. She picked up her phone and started scrolling like she'd just checked support my mom's affair off her to-do list. Did she tell you they're thinking of moving in together? She said casually, not looking up. That was when something in my chest pulled tight. Not broke. Not snapped. Just pulled. like a piano wire winding just a little too far. I remember thinking, so this is what it feels like when the last person you trust shifts to the other side. You're okay with this? I finally asked, my voice low. She blinked and looked at me like I'd asked if she liked her coffee. I mean, yeah, it's weird, sure. But they're happy. And Connor's always been good to me. Connor. She said his name with ease. Like he wasn't the man who used to leer at her friends. Like he wasn't the creep who once drunkenly told me Melissa had the best hips in the family. Like I hadn't caught him skimming bourbon from my cabinet back in 2012 and excused it as family tension. And now he was Dad 2.0. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake something loose. But instead, I just sat there, listening to her talk about their plans like she was pitching a startup. At one point, she said, "You'll be okay, right?" And the casualness of it almost made me laugh. I looked at her and realized something cruel. She didn't want me to be okay. Not really. Because if I fell apart, she could justify being on their side. If I lost it, she could tell herself that this was why her mom left. So I gave her what she needed. I nodded, said nothing. She stood up, kissed the top of my head, and said, "I think this is for the best." Then she walked out of my house. I watched the door close behind her. The same door I'd carried her through on her 5th birthday because she refused to walk after a fall. The same hallway I paced through on sleepless nights when she had ear infections. And now she was gone. Not just physically. Gone. 2 people I would have taken bullets for had just informed me, calmly, politely, with smiles and coffee, that I was no longer necessary. No longer invited to the version of family they were building. But that was fine, because I still had the envelope. I left before the coffee finished brewing. She was still asleep upstairs, in the bed I'd bought when my back started going bad 5 years ago. I remember because it took me a month to find the right firmness, and 2 weeks later she said it felt clinical. Too stiff, like everything else I chose. I didn't write a note. Didn't slam any doors. Just zipped the suitcase, paused by the front hallway to look at the dent in the drywall from where Sophie launched her first soccer trophy at age 8, and walked to the office. The drawer was 3rd down on the left. Cherry wood, dull brass handles. I built the cabinet with my brother back when we still talked. Funny how everyone seems to drift when they know too much. I pulled it open and let my hand hover for a second over the rows of neatly labeled folders. Taxes, real estate, firm agreements, grandfather's war bonds. Then I saw it. Thick, white, sealed with a blood-red sticker tab. Labeled in my handwriting. If she ever leaves. It wasn't dramatic. Wasn't it just in case she cheats fantasy like some angry husband's draft in whiskey haze? I'm not that sentimental. I wrote it the night she came back from that so-called self-discovery retreat in Sedona and smelled like smoked cedar and guilt. It was the same night she told me she didn't believe in monogamy in the traditional sense anymore and asked why I couldn't try evolving too. That was 4 years ago. That night, I'd stayed up in the office, poured a scotch, and rewrote our estate plan. Not out of spite, out of instinct. The kind that kicks in when you know, deep down, someone's not just pulling away. They're plotting a departure. A calculated, smiling betrayal. The envelope contained 6 documents. All of them notarized, witnessed, legally bulletproof. I'd had a friend at the firm review them off record, no names. He thought it was theoretical. A client case. It wasn't. The beauty of estate law is that if you're meticulous, if you really plan, you can make silence into a weapon. People underestimate quiet men. They assume we'll crumble when the storm hits. What they don't see is that we build during storms. I placed the envelope into the side pocket of my suitcase. The rest of the drawer I left untouched. She'd ransack it eventually once she realized she didn't actually understand how any of this worked. She'd open file after file looking for something to claim, but she wouldn't find it. Because all the strings that looked like they connected to our life, the business, the house, the trusts, had been quietly rewoven into a web she couldn't even see, let alone untangle. I zipped the bag, stood up straight, and looked around the office one last time. My diplomas hung above the desk, slightly crooked. The plant by the window had been dying for months. I'd been the only one watering it. Figures. I stepped into the hallway, past the photos, all the glossy, curated shots of a family that had never actually existed. There was one from our 10th anniversary in Napa. Melissa wore that black dress she said made her feel expensive. I looked at it now and didn't feel a thing. Just a dull curiosity, like flipping through a stranger's wedding album. At the front door, I hesitated. The silence of the house was thick, unnatural. I could almost feel the echo of what she'd said 2 nights ago. This is destiny. Yeah. And sometimes destiny gets documented, notarized, and filed under irrevocable. I stepped outside, closed the door softly behind me, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. The first time I noticed it, the pull, the retreat, was so subtle it could have been chalked up to seasonal blues. She stopped reaching for my hand at dinner. Her laugh became quieter. Her phone was always face down, and her showers always longer. At first, I told myself it was work stress, hormones, the usual suspects you blame when you don't want to face the actual threat standing in your own damn kitchen. But I've spent a career reading people's blind spots, especially the ones they leave in ink. And Melissa? She started leaving blind spots all over the place. So I did what I was trained to do. I started writing. Not journals, not angry letters. No, I rewrote futures. I spent nights drafting documents that, if you glanced at them, looked like routine updates, the kind we do for wealthy clients every year. But every clause, every decimal, every trust line was drawn with one outcome in mind: extraction. Not from her. From the fantasy I'd been sold. I moved the business, Hayes Financial, into a holding structure with dual trustees, me and a former mentor of mine who lives in a cabin and hates drama. I rewrote the deed on the house so that technically, the property was owned by a foundation I'd created in honor of my father, who hated Melissa with Olympic-level enthusiasm and who'd once told me, she's a smile with teeth behind it. The pensions? Folded into irrevocable trust with triggering clauses based on abandonment. Inheritance from my father? Already long separated, disguised within generational skips and asset shields with iron locks. Every move done quietly, legally, and years in advance, long before she ever packed her overnight bag with lingerie, just in case the spa had a hot tub. I remember the day I printed the master set. It was raining, not the cinematic kind, just that boring, sideways drizzle that feels more like irritation than weather. Melissa had left her email open, and I saw a message to someone named CJ that ended with "Can't wait to see you again. Missed the way you hold me after." She told me she was seeing her mother that weekend. I didn't react. Didn't even breathe heavy. I just clicked save, moved the final clauses into place, and printed the package labeled "If she files first." 7 taps, 1 notarization pre-scheduled, all of it stored in my fireproof cabinet under a decoy file named Retirement B. Years passed. We played house. She drifted further. She talked less. She grew bolder, louder absences, bolder gaslighting. Once, she even said, "You're so lucky I haven't just walked away." Most women would. I smiled and said, "I suppose I am." She thought that was surrender. It wasn't. It was set up. So when the email hit, from her lawyer, of course, with the subject line, Hayes divorce filing, initial petition, and demands, I didn't flinch. I opened my cabinet, pulled the envelope, walked to the printer, clicked print. The machine hummed like it was printing menus for a catered wedding. 15 years of marriage, and it all came down to black ink on cotton bond paper. Her attorney thought this would be simple. Standard division, spousal support, maybe a partial claim to the firm. After all, Melissa had supported me emotionally while I built the empire. Funny thing about empires, they don't belong to people who sit courtside cheering. They belong to the ones who build the walls. So I stacked the papers, clipped them neatly, and placed them into a folder titled Final Response. No anger, no shaking hands, no smugness, either. Just the quiet satisfaction of a man who knew this moment was inevitable and made peace with it years ago. She'd made her move. She thought I'd panic, thought I'd grovel, maybe fight to keep her from leaving. Instead, I just printed the end credits. She showed up with a folder and a fresh blowout. Hair curled, nails immaculate, sunglasses tucked into her collar like she'd just wrapped brunch with a senator. Behind her trailed a man in a navy suit that screamed least confidence, daring something, her attorney. Early 40s, designer watch too tight on his wrist, a smile that looked practiced in front of bathroom mirrors. The kind of guy who probably winked at paralegals and said things like, "I'm a closer." I opened the front door like a man greeting the weather. Melissa stepped inside like she owned the place. She didn't even look at the photos anymore, the ones she used to fake nostalgia over when guests were around. Us in Tahoe. Us in Florence. Sophia's a toddler, covered in birthday cake. She walked past them now like they were exhibits in a museum she didn't respect. Darren set his briefcase down on the dining table like it was a stage and began unpacking. She smiled at me, that wide, rehearsed smile she'd been perfecting for years. "Let's keep this civil, okay?" she said, like I was the one who'd broken the script. He slid the manila envelope across the table and started his pitch. "This is a fair division. Very standard. We're asking for 50% of the shared estate, reasonable alimony, and partial control over Hayes Financial, given Melissa's long-term support of the business. There's precedent. Support. As in, not interfering while I built it from the ground up. As in, occasionally asking if those quarterly numbers are still okay, while she browsed yoga retreats. As in, showing up to one corporate dinner a year and spending half of it critiquing the appetizers." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I took the folder, flipped it open, and read. Half the estate. Monthly spousal maintenance indefinitely. Executive access to Hayes Financial decisions, pending valuation. She was going for the jugular. And she thought it was a spa massage. Melissa leaned across the table and tapped the edge of the packet. "I'll make this as painless as possible," she said sweetly. "Just sign it, and we can all move on." I met her eyes. There wasn't anger in mine. No resentment. That would have thrilled her, would have made her feel powerful. Instead, I smiled. Not smug. Not fake. Just the quiet curve of a man who's known the ending for a very long time. "Of course," I said. "I'll sign everything." Darren blinked, clearly unprepared for zero resistance. Melissa tilted her head slightly, as if confused. I looked down again at the papers, pretending to read them a second time, not because I needed to, but because I enjoyed watching her bask in her illusion of control. This was her Oscar moment. The victorious ex-wife. She'd rehearsed it in her head. Probably told her book club some sanitized version. Derek just wasn't emotionally present, and Connor really sees me. I could see it all over her face. She thought she'd won. What she didn't know was that the estate she believed she was dividing had been gutted long before she arrived at the table. She thought she was carving up a mansion. She didn't know it was already ashes. "Can we get this notarized tomorrow?" Darren asked. "Absolutely," I said. Melissa nodded, relieved. She truly believed this was going to be smooth. Simple. Bloodless. I escorted them out like a good host. Darren shook my hand, a little too firm, a little too performative. Melissa looked at me one last time before getting in the car. "You're being very mature about this," she said. I nodded, then watched them drive away, tail lights blinking like signals from another universe. When they turned the corner, I stepped back inside, closed the door, and walked to my office. There was a folder already waiting on my desk, labeled "Response for Filing." Inside, all the signatures, all the redirection, all the protection. I slid the divorce packet Melissa gave me into the drawer next to it. And then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the trap had already closed. And none of them heard the click. Her office didn't have art on the walls, just certifications, shelves of casebooks, and a silent coffee machine that looked like it hadn't worked in years. The whole space had the sterile, focused energy of someone who didn't decorate because they didn't need to. Marla Costas didn't do empathy. She didn't lean forward and ask if I was holding up okay. She greeted me with a clipped nod, motioned toward a chair, and said, "Start talking." I slid the folder across her desk. She opened it, adjusted her glasses, and within 30 seconds I saw it, the grin. Tight, precise, clinical, like a surgeon spotting an artery right where it needed to be. "Ah," she said, flipping to the trust documents I drafted myself. "So you're not just a quiet man. You're a dangerous one." "I'm a planner," I replied. She scanned in silence for a full 5 minutes, only interrupting herself to mutter, "Jesus, you really buried the lead." When she got to the last clause, the abandonment trigger linked to irrevocable trust transfer, she leaned back and said, "Oh, she thinks she won already." I nodded. "Perfect," she said, tapping her pen against the desk like she was already outlining the pressurized points. "She's walking into court thinking this is about division. It's not. It's about illusion." She's going to get exactly what she asked for, and not 1 cent more. I didn't have to explain Melissa to her. Marla had seen the type before. She's the kind that treats loyalty like it's a customer service issue, Marla said. She expects 5-star treatment while she explores her options. And if you complain, you're the problem. She got it. We worked fast. Marla restructured the response paperwork into something deceptively clean. A lean 8-page reply that didn't argue, didn't contest, didn't even look defensive. It simply agreed, with language so polished, so calmly compliant, that it would lull any halfway decent attorney into a false sense of dominance. Melissa's team wanted half the shared estate? Sure, but we let them define that estate exactly as they misunderstood it, because nowhere in their filings did they reference Hayes Financial Holdings, the protective trusts, or the foundational shell accounts I'd created years prior. They went after the house. We agreed to their valuation, which was frozen in legal terms 5 months ago, before I had the home's title reassigned to the family trust as part of future charitable use. They asked for partial executive access to the business. We accepted, to the entity that technically no longer held any profitable assets. Hayes Financial as a shell existed. The money, however, had long since been moved to a protected structure 2 layers removed, where she'd need both my signature and a second trustee's consent to touch a dollar. She'd get what she demanded, the surface image of victory. But it would be like trying to eat a photograph of food. Marla emailed the draft to me for review and said, "You'll be the most generous ex-husband the court's ever seen. And she won't realize the catch until the ink's dry." I said, "That's the best time," she smirked. "When they're already posing for the picture and the floor drops out." I signed everything that afternoon. Not out of bitterness. Out of design. Melissa wanted to win. So I built her a trophy out of hollow wood, polished it until it gleamed, and placed it right in the middle of the table. Let her hold it up. Let her wave it around. The bottom would fall out soon enough. It was a Wednesday, mid-morning, and I was reviewing a client file when my phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification, one of those social media alerts I normally ignored. I kept the apps mostly to keep track of Sophie. Not to snoop, just to know she was okay. That was always my excuse. I opened it without thinking, and there it was. A photo. Sophie, smiling, holding a glass of white wine. Melissa next to her, glowing like a woman half her age, in that low-cut wrap dress I once complimented her in before she started dressing for herself. And across from them, arm casually thrown over the back of Melissa's chair like he owned her, Connor. Caption: "Dinner with Mom and Connor. Family always finds a way, blue heart." I stared at it. Not in shock. Not even in pain. Just fascinated. Like watching a painting melt in real time. They were sitting at Truss and Timber, an upscale bistro downtown where Melissa and I used to go for our anniversary dinners. I recognized the marble wall behind them. The wine glasses. The teal napkins folded just so. That place was a ritual. A symbol. Now it was just another canvas for her victory parade. Family always finds a way. That was the part that caught me. It wasn't just the smugness. It was the rewrite. The audacity to reframe adultery with a blue heart emoji and serve it like a Hallmark moment. My daughter, our daughter, was posing like they were the Brady Bunch and I was the weird uncle who died off-screen in season 2. I scrolled the comments. "So happy for you guys. OMG, such a beautiful family," smiling face with hard eyes. "Connor looks like he belongs." He belongs. Yeah, like a splinter in bone. But here's the thing. I didn't feel what I expected. No rage. No heartbreak. I just felt steady. Because while they were out toasting to fate, I was at home, sharpening the blade they didn't even know existed. That's the danger with people like Melissa and Connor. They think the absence of a fight means surrender. They think if you don't scream, you're broken. If you're quiet, you're weak. They've never learned what still water hides underneath. I saved the post. Not for evidence. I didn't need it legally. I saved it because it was art. The perfect moment. The peak before the fall. The snapshot of a woman celebrating at a feast she thought she'd cooked, when in fact, she was the dish. They thought the hearing next week would be a formality. Melissa told Sophie it would be quick and clean. Told her they'd go out after and celebrate turning the page. And they probably would. Connor in that awful linen blazer. Melissa glowing in post-victory haze. Sophie clapping along like a flower girl at a wedding that should never have been written. I closed the app and placed the phone face down. The hammer was nearly ready. The handle carved, the weight balanced. Not out of vengeance. Out of engineering. And in 1 week, I'd let it fall. She walked in wearing white. Not ivory, not cream. White. Like it was some twisted vow renewal and she'd just been waiting for the aisle. The irony wasn't subtle, but Melissa never did subtle. She liked symbolism she could weaponize. A dress that said rebirth. Heels that said I'm above this. And a walk that screamed victory lap. Connor followed close behind, smirking like the sleazy best man at a shotgun wedding. He wore that same smug confidence, the kind of look men wear when they've never built a damn thing themselves but still think they've earned it. His shirt was half untucked, like he wanted people to know he was too cool to care, even in court. And then there was Sophie, my daughter, wearing soft blue, holding her mother's hand like she was leading her down a sacred aisle. Her face was carefully curated, polite smile, no makeup, chin high. I couldn't tell if it was defiance or confusion. Maybe both. Maybe she didn't know whose side she was truly on yet. But her body language gave it away. She was standing in their pew now. They walked past me without a glance. Like I was the waiter at their celebration lunch, not the man who once carried them both through storms they didn't even see coming. I sat at the front, alone. No entourage. No distractions. Just a clean suit, quiet hands, and a folder that sat neatly in front of me, centered on the table. Labeled, Final. Marla entered 5 minutes later, phone in hand. Eyes locked and surgical. She gave me a sharp nod and sat down beside me, flipping open her own binder like she was prepping a scalpel. Her entire presence hummed with restrained voltage. She didn't even glance at the opposition. Melissa and Darren sat across from us. She didn't look tense. In fact, she looked relaxed, like this was her post-breakup yoga class and she already knew the final pose. I caught the moment her eyes flicked to the final tab on my folder. She tilted her head, smirked, thought it was performance art. She had no idea. The judge entered. We rose. Everyone sat. Formalities. Introductions. Oaths. Melissa's lawyer started in with the preamble. Words like amicable, cooperative, equitable. He ran through their requests with the smug cadence of a man expecting zero friction, 50% of joint assets, spousal support, business equity. He spoke like we were all here to rubber stamp a coronation. When it was our turn, Marla didn't stand immediately. She waited, let the air stretch just a second too long. Then she rose, smiled, and said, Your Honor, my client has no objections to the division as proposed. We have prepared a full agreement, with all requested concessions, alimony, estate division, business shares signed, sealed, and ready for the court's review. Melissa blinked, surprised. That wasn't the line she'd expected. Darren smiled, eyes flicking to Melissa in triumph, like, see, told you we scared him straight. The judge nodded and said, Let's review the documentation, then. Marla handed over our file. Melissa leaned over to glance, brows furrowed now. I didn't say a word. Didn't move. I just watched her from the corner of my eye, watched her waiting for the catch that wasn't coming. Because it had already happened. The trap didn't need a spring. It was the floor beneath her. And it had already vanished. The pin felt heavier than it should have. Not because of sentiment, that part had burned out weeks ago. No, it was the weight of precision. Years of planning, lines rewritten, signatures preloaded like bullets in a quiet war. I didn't hesitate, though. I opened the folder labeled Final, slid the pages out, and signed each line with clean, practiced strokes. No questions. No stalling. No fight. Across the table, Darren grinned like a man who just closed on beachfront property he didn't realize was underwater. Melissa sat beside him, arms neatly folded, looking like a woman watching a dream unfold exactly as she storyboarded. She leaned slightly over the polished oak and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Thank you for being decent about this. Decent. That word. The way she said it, like I was some pitiful ex-boyfriend returning her favorite sweater and finally finding closure. I didn't respond. Just nodded once, slowly, and turned back to the final signature. Darren handed the packet to the clerk with a look of victorious restraint. The kind that says I win, but I'm too professional to gloat. Melissa squeezed his arm like she was congratulating herself for choosing the right team. And still, I said nothing. Because silence, in the right hands, is louder than screaming. The clerk took the documents, checked for initials, and passed them to the judge's assistant. Melissa crossed one leg over the other, adjusting her dress like she was preparing for applause. Even Sophie gave a small smile from the bench behind her, as if she was proud of how graceful her mother was being during this transition. They really believed it was over. They thought the show was wrapping up nicely, no mess, no backlash. Melissa likely imagined herself walking out of the courtroom to a new life where she got the house, half the business, and a daughter who never questioned her new truth. That's what she'd always wanted, a clean escape with the illusion of dignity. And I gave her exactly what she wanted. On paper. Because here's what they didn't know. Every asset they believed they were dividing had already been legally migrated, redrawn, shielded, months before she ever filed. Everything she saw as ours was, by then, mine and no longer accessible. Every line she claimed was fair was a mirror, one way, designed to reflect her ambition back at her while concealing the chasm behind it. She had the outline. I held the architecture. And now the signatures were locked in. She thought I was defeated. She thought I was docile. But all I'd done was let her decorate the cage. She kissed the air in my direction as the judge flipped through the packet. A final insult disguised as civility. Behind her, Connor leaned back smugly, arms crossed, not even pretending to respect the process. He thought it was all over too. A clean break. No drama. Maybe he thought I'd cry in the parking lot. Maybe he thought I'd try to win her back. They were both wrong. The page turned. The final line was read. And in 15 minutes, the trapdoor would open. The silence in the courtroom shifted, not loud, not sudden, but dense. The kind of silence that makes people sit straighter without realizing why. Even the clerk glanced up from her screen. The judge, a tall man with silver hair and the emotional expressiveness of a parking meter, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. His tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. But that made it worse. "Ms. Hayes," he said, flipping through the final stack of forms we had submitted. "Before I proceed, I'd like to confirm that you've reviewed your financial rights and entitlements with your attorney." Melissa tilted her head. Her mouth twitched, just slightly, like she didn't like the direction of the tone. "Of course," she said, with that faux-polite edge she used with waiters who brought her the wrong wine. Darren chimed in, chipper. "We've reviewed everything thoroughly, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Then you're aware," he continued, turning another page, "that the estate being divided reflects an approximate total of $48,000 in shared liquid assets, and that the entity formerly known as Hayes Financial, along with all related trust and property holdings, are excluded from the marital estate due to irrevocable restructuring prior to filing?" Melissa blinked. For the first time all morning, she stopped smiling. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice suddenly sharper. "What did you say?" The judge didn't look up. "The shared checking account is listed at $48,320. The rest, including all corporate shares, retirement holdings, and real estate, are currently held in protective entities not subject to division under the current agreements. You did initial each section." He paused. "Twice." Melissa's head turned toward Darren like it was on a pivot. "That can't be right," she hissed. Darren flipped rapidly through his copy. "No, we were under the impression that..." But the judge cut him off. "The language is clear. The respondent," he gestured toward me without looking, "disclosed all financial documentation. Your filings did not object or provide any evidence to the contrary. You consented to the division as written." Melissa sat up straight now, her voice trembling but trying to hide it behind anger. "That business is ours. I supported it for 15 years. I'm entitled to it. What you signed for," the judge said flatly. Connor uncrossed his arms behind her. His smirk had wilted. I didn't move. Just watched. She turned to Darren, eyes wide. "You told me." "I was not made aware of these asset protections," he stammered. "These trusts, this is complex structuring. It's not standard." Marla, calm as ever, finally spoke for the first time. "They were filed legally and properly, Your Honor. All disclosures were included in our responses. If opposing counsel failed to review them fully, that's unfortunate, but not our burden." The judge nodded again. Melissa's face turned blotchy, not from crying, not yet, but from realization. That creeping horror when a person realizes they're not in a courtroom anymore. They're in a cage they helped weld shut. She looked at me, not with fury, with panic. I held her gaze, just long enough. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her throat worked like she wanted to shout fraud, manipulation, something. But there was nothing left to claw at. No leverage. No fallback. Just a signature. Her own. Connor leaned forward now, whispering something into her ear. I didn't hear what he said, but she pulled her arm away. And for the first time in years, she looked small. Cornered. Not the radiant woman in white. Just a woman who realized she'd walked into court with an empty purse and handed over the keys to a kingdom she never even learned how to enter. I leaned back in my chair. Not a word. I didn't need one. It was Marla who delivered the kill shot. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies. No finger-pointing, no theatrics. She simply opened her briefcase, pulled out a thin stack of papers with a blue binder clip, and slid them across the table with 2 fingers like she was handing over a receipt for dry cleaning. Your Honor, she said, voice clear, emotionless, for the record, and in response to any implied ambiguity regarding the estate structure, we're submitting full documentation detailing the respondent's asset restructuring, all dated and filed prior to the petitioner's initial divorce filing. The judge took them without a blink. Melissa stared at the papers like they were in a foreign language. Her fingers hovered over them, but didn't touch. What is that? She asked, eyes darting to Darren. Marla answered, The irrevocable trust, Ms. Hayes. The one your husband legally executed over a year ago. Triggered by spousal abandonment, as defined in the original prenuptial and supplemental agreements. All assets moved under trustee control, independently managed, non-reversible. The only marital liquid fund left available at the time of your filing was the joint checking account, which, as we've agreed, contains $48,000. Melissa's hand shot out. She snatched the papers, flipping through them like she could find an escape clause by turning the pages fast enough. No, she whispered, then louder. No, this is fraud. He tricked me. She stood up so fast the chair screeched against the tile. Sophie flinched behind her. Connor sat completely still, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched like he was realizing he should have paid closer attention during pillow talk. The judge looked up at Melissa, unfazed. You signed, Ms. Hayes, he said flatly. He disclosed. You just didn't read. It wasn't a gavel that made the sound. It was the silence that followed. Melissa was trembling now. Not tears, not yet. Just the unmistakable shift from disbelief to humiliation. Her gaze bounced from the judge to Darren to Marla and finally landed on me. And for the first time in a very long time, she looked like someone who knew exactly what she'd lost. Are you kidding me? She hissed, looking at Darren, her voice rising. You told me we had control of the firm. That the house was community property. You said we'd win. You said that, Darren muttered under his breath, suddenly rearranging his papers with furious interest. Melissa's hand shook as she jabbed a finger at the trust documentation. I didn't see this. This wasn't. Marla didn't even look up. It was in the response packet. Page 11. Initialed by you. Melissa turned to me again. Her eyes were wild now, no longer confident or cunning. Just pure panic behind a collapsing mask. You planned this, she spat. You planned this from the beginning. You knew I was going to leave. I finally spoke. Not knew. Just listened. She stared. I smiled. Nothing big. Just enough for her to see that I'd been waiting for this moment. Not to gloat. Not to humiliate her. Just to end the illusion. The judge turned back to his docket, disinterested in the emotional aftershocks. If there are no other objections, we'll proceed to finalize the terms. Melissa opened her mouth again, but no sound came. Because there was no case left to make. Only ash. The gavel didn't fall that day. It didn't need to. She did. The house was quiet in the way only freedom can be. Not the hollow kind of silence, not grief, not shock. Just stillness. The kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission. 3 weeks had passed since court. 3 weeks since she stood in that courtroom in white, demanding a crown from the ashes. I'd moved into the lake house, the one she never liked. Said it was too minimal, too masculine. I used to joke that it was too honest for her taste. Now, it was home. A deck that looked out over still water, bourbon in hand, no one asking where I'd been or why I was quiet. The sun was sinking into the lake like a secret being buried. The bourbon was smooth. The ice had almost melted. Then my phone buzzed. A single message. From Melissa. You destroyed me. You poisoned our daughter. I hope it was worth it. I stared at it. Not with anger. Not with guilt. Just with clarity. She didn't say you lied or you manipulated me. She said you destroyed me. As if she were the victim in a story she wrote in lipstick and lies. Poisoned our daughter? No. I gave Sophie the same choice I gave Melissa. I stayed still. I didn't chase. I didn't beg. They walked. I just let them. Out of habit more than anything, I opened Sophie's page. She'd posted 2 days ago something about finding peace through boundaries. But now her profile was blank. Blocked. No message. No call. Just digital erasure. She'd made her choice. I wasn't surprised. For her, this was a loyalty test she never signed up for, and failed anyway. Because deep down, she wanted to believe in her mother's fantasy. That love was messy but always justified. That betrayal could be repackaged as growth. I closed the app. Deleted Melissa's message. No reply. No, I understand. Nothing. Because there's nothing left to understand. They didn't just cheat. They collaborated. They built a whole damn narrative. Cast me as the villain. And now that it collapsed under real-world weight, contracts, signatures, truth, I was suddenly the executioner. Let them believe that. Let them live in the version where I was the monster, because facing the mirror would take more courage than either of them owned. The sun kissed the horizon. The bourbon caught the light. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't wondering where anyone was. I wasn't tiptoeing around moods or waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was alone. Not abandoned. Not left. Excused. From the performance. From the pretense. From the slow suffocation of a house that called itself home but hadn't been one in years. She thought I'd grieve. She thought she'd win. All I did was let her hang herself with paperwork and ego. And now, at last, I could breathe. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped pretending that she ever loved me at all. You're nobody. That's what she said. On my birthday. In my kitchen. Holding the gift I paid for. In a house I refinanced so her mother could quit her job and find herself. Rachel, my stepdaughter, didn't even blink when she said it. 16, smug, wearing a sweatshirt from some Ivy League she hadn't even applied to yet. Behind her, my wife Melanie smirked like she was watching a sitcom rerun. Same look she used to give me when I forgot to take the trash out. Except now it carried something colder. Meaner. You were always just temporary, Melanie added, reaching for the orange juice like she'd just ordered an appetizer. Brian builds companies. Brian. The name dropped like a wine stain on white carpet. I didn't need the last name. I'd seen the late-night texts. The sudden interest in consulting retreats. The way she started going to the gym in lipstick. I'd even seen the laptop left open. FaceTime paused mid-grin on a man who looked like he moisturized with arrogance and crypto. But I never said a word. Not even when I saw her turn our bedroom into her walk-in closet. Not even when Rachel stopped calling me David and started calling me him. Because I was playing a different game. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. So when Melanie handed me a card, no gift, just a grocery store birthday card signed with her initials, I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I poured my coffee, sat at the table in front of my untouched German chocolate cake, and listened to them discuss Brian like I'd already passed away. Then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed in red wax, not for drama, but because I knew it would make her hesitate. I placed it next to my plate. Melanie stopped mid-sentence. Rachel looked at it like it was ticking. I stood. Thank you for breakfast, I said. That's all. No raised voice. No bitter sarcasm. Just a calm, almost polite farewell. And I walked out. Not just out of the kitchen. Out of the house. Out of the charade. Out of the skin I'd worn for too damn long pretending their approval meant anything. As I shut the front door behind me, I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I could already feel the shift. The discomfort. The questions they wouldn't ask until too late. I drove away without checking the mirror. By sunset, my phone was deactivated. By nightfall, my bank accounts were rerouted. By the time Melanie texted, "Where are you?" I'd already closed the account the message was sent to. You don't scream at people like that. You don't fight. You just leave the table they thought they had set for you. Because when someone tells you you're a nobody, the real power comes when you show them how quiet somebody can be. 3 hours after I walked out, I was off the grid. Not in the melodramatic, living in a cabin, eating beans from a kin kind of way. No, this was strategic deletion. I'd been preparing for months. Mail rerouted to a private box 2 states over. A new LLC filed in a name no one had heard in decades. Mine before the first marriage. My lawyer, Wallace, had every document pre-signed and filed under quiet trigger conditions. As far as the system was concerned, David Monroe had folded. Gone. Not a missing person, just someone who'd finally gotten tired of playing the family idiot. Melanie texted. Called. Then nothing. She assumed I was spiraling. Heartbroken. Maybe holed up in some motel with a bottle of regret. Good. Because while she went back to breakfast smoothies and Brian's protein shake grin, I was doing something far more interesting. I was reappearing. Not in her life. In his. The mistake Brian made, his fatal one, was assuming I had no value. That I was just some gray-haired tax write-off with a thinning hairline and a vinyl record collection. He never once asked what I did before I became Stepdad David. See, once upon a time, before Melanie, before Rachel, before real estate brochures and marriage therapy, and can we talk about your communication style? I'd been someone. I'd been early in tech. Not the flashy kind, the infrastructure kind. The wiring. The sweat work. The foundation people forget exists once the glass walls and IPO buzzwords go up. Back then, I helped seed capital for companies most people now couldn't imagine life without. And one of those people I helped, Richard Kellman, better known now as the silent co-founder of Vector One. The same Vector One that Brian now claimed to be building from scratch. 1 week after I left, Melanie's co-worker, Joanne, the one who always brought bland chicken salad and overshared during HR Zoom calls, asked the question that started the unraveling. Wasn't your husband on the advisory board for Vector One? Melanie blinked. No, that's Brian's company. Joanne tilted her head. No, I mean your ex-husband. David. His name's in the new board filings. They sent the update last night. Melanie excused herself mid-meeting and speed-walked to her office. She searched. There it was. Board of Advisors, Vector One Holdings. David Monroe. A new entry. Fresh ink. But worse, there was a file attached to the SEC update. A PDF, dry and technical, but with 3 words that hit like a migraine. Non-executive strategic counsel. It meant I wasn't just a passive name. It meant I had influence. She stared at the screen. Tried to remember the last time I mentioned tech. When she'd last asked what I did before she made me her husband prop for family holiday cards. She hadn't. Because in her world, I'd been decorative. Now, I was structural. Brian would find out soon enough, when his funding request hit a compliance snag. When Richard forwarded him a memo with my notes in the margins. When the man he thought he'd replaced with charm and a Tesla suddenly held the keys to the back end of his empire. Melanie didn't text me again after that, but I know what she did next. She opened the envelope. Too late. Brian was in his element. Standing in front of a half-circle of VCs in designer sneakers and Patagonia vests, he clicked through his slides like a TED Talk runner-up with a trust fund complex. Terms like frictionless scaling, cross-platform synergy, and AI-enhanced verticals rolled off his tongue like buzzword confetti. Smug didn't cover it. The man thought he was rewriting Silicon Valley from a WeWork lounge. Until he walked in. No fanfare. No greeting. Just a slow creak of the conference room door and the arrival of someone who didn't belong, but clearly outranked everyone in the room. Older. Heavy set. Silver tie clip. Sharp eyes that scanned the room like he'd already read every LinkedIn bio at the table and found them all laughable. He didn't sit. Didn't shake hands. He just looked directly at Brian and said, calmly, "Founding rights are murky. You'll want to clean that up before Series B. Otherwise the cap table won't hold." The room went dead quiet. Brian stammered something about NDAs and early-stage fluidity, But the man ignored him completely, turned to one of the junior partners and asked, "Has your firm done diligence on the 2014 debt instruments that seeded their early infrastructure?" The partner blinked. I don't think. You should," the man interrupted. "There's a clause in the fallback agreement that makes this entire pitch legally ambitious." He left before Brian could form a full sentence. By the time Brian got back to their condo that evening, the smirk was gone. No Tesla charging Instagram posts. No passive flexes about VC brunches. Just quiet. And tension. Melanie was on the couch, trying to pretend she hadn't spent the last hour Googling everything she could about Delaware corporate law. She looked up as he entered. Brian didn't say hello. He dropped his bag, loosened his tie. Then, like a man who had just realized he wasn't the apex predator in the room, he asked, "Who's Richard K?" She froze. The air shifted. Not what, who? Richard Kellman. That name had been sealed away, like a box labeled "before me." Melanie's mouth opened, but her voice didn't follow. Because Richard Kellman wasn't just a name from David's past. He was her late husband's best friend. The one who cried at the funeral. The one who stopped visiting after she remarried too quickly. The one who vanished quietly when David entered the picture and apparently never truly left. Worse, he was loyal. David once told her that Richard was the kind of man who never forgot a debt. That when David saved Richard's company during the 2008 crash by cashing out his own 401k, Richard swore he'd return the favor in silence and with scale. She thought it was just one of those masculine friendship things men say when they drink too much. Apparently, it wasn't. Brian sat down across from her, leaned forward, and lowered his voice. "Your ex-husband just brought a knife to a gunfight, and he's the only one who knew where all the bullets were buried." She didn't respond, because deep down, she knew it wasn't a gunfight anymore. It was an execution, and David wasn't done. David didn't go off the grid. He went back to the roots. While Melanie imagined him pacing motel carpets and scribbling in tear-soaked journals, he was actually drinking single malt on a porch in northern Vermont, overlooking a lake Richard Kellman now called home. Not the kind of lake you find on travel blogs. This one was private, quiet, no cell towers, no influencers, just strategy, stories, and silence between two men who understood what the long game actually meant. David wasn't hiding. He was rebuilding, consulting, advising, drawing out war plans over bourbon with a man who'd once slept in his guest room during the worst year of his life. "I told you I'd pay it back," Richard muttered one night, staring into the flames of the stone hearth. "You're doing more than that," David replied. "You're helping me remind them I was never temporary. I was waiting." Meanwhile, back in their high-rise apartment, Melanie was discovering just how much could unravel when the person you dismiss starts pulling threads. Rachel, her darling daughter, future Columbia undergrad, Brian's biggest fan, screamed from her room when her iPad refused to connect to their shared family cloud. "It's not showing my music. Why is Dad's old Spotify even on this thing?" she yelled. Melanie brushed it off until her own phone froze mid-purchase at Whole Foods. Declined. Twice. "Try another card," the cashier mumbled, already reaching for the next customer. She did. Declined again. When she got home, there was a fraud alert email in her inbox from the bank, but the flagged charge wasn't from Nigeria or Vietnam. It was a dinner receipt. From the same Vermont town Richard had vanished to. 3 guests. No details. Just a handwritten tip line signed, "Appreciate your loyalty." That wasn't the only oddity. Brian, already rattled from the pitch meeting debacle, logged into the Vector One backend to check on the latest IP filings, standard patent tracking for an upcoming product line they were planning to license out. But something was wrong. His name was gone. From everything. Design credits. Algorithmic contributions. Even the original submission metadata gone. Like he'd never touched the damn thing. Instead, the patents were now associated with a new entity, DMK Consulting. Small font. Registered in Delaware. And the listed contacts? David Monroe. Richard Kellman. Brian exploded. "This has to be a clerical error," he shouted, slamming his laptop shut. But he knew better. Everyone in this world knows IP changes don't happen by accident. They happen in boardrooms. In silence. With signatures made months ago. Melanie stood there watching him unravel, unable to speak. Because deep down, she knew what was happening. David hadn't disappeared. He positioned. And the worst part? He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even visible. He was operating like a ghost with a scalpel, making incisions so precise they wouldn't even feel the cuts until they'd already started bleeding out. The subject line was deceptively plain. Notice of filed agreement. Separation of joint marital assets. Monroe versus Monroe. Melanie almost deleted it, assuming it was another lawyer fishing for clients. Then she saw the sender. A boutique firm from Boston. One David had mentioned once, years ago, back when they still shared dreams over diner pancakes and not cold stares across the kitchen island. She opened it. Read the first line. Then read it again. David had filed for asset separation 3 months ago. It was backdated. Legally binding. Signed. Notarized. Quietly, officially, and completely without her knowledge. There was a note from the attorney included. As per the conditions agreed upon during preliminary arbitration, your awareness is considered established by receipt of the sealed envelope delivered on her birthday. Her hands trembled. That envelope. The one she laughed at. The one she left on the kitchen table under a coupon flyer and later used as a coaster for a mimosa. She never opened it. Thought it was dramatic flair. A symbolic gesture from a man she assumed was too passive to ever really walk away. It wasn't symbolic. It was a bomb with a delayed fuse. Brian walked in mid-panic, still trying to get through to Vector One's CTO, who wasn't answering calls. He noticed her expression immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, dropping his laptop bag on the floor. She didn't speak, just turned the screen toward him. He scrolled. Paused. His eyes narrowed. "This references our shared equity," he muttered. "Why is he? Oh, come on." No. This clause links our joint holdings in the household trust to board influence? What the hell, eh? She finally found her voice. "What does that mean, Brian?" "It means," he said, voice low and tight, "that he didn't just file for separation. He did it in a way that attached your assets to my future shares. He looped your half of the household trust into his legal leverage. And since you used the trust to partially co-invest in Vector One, your name is tied to my equity pool." He looked up at her like she'd just handed a live grenade to their enemy. "You married a man who knew what leverage meant." Melanie blinked. She had spent years thinking David was a placeholder. A polite, outdated piece of furniture that collected dust in the corner of her life while she renovated her future with a startup cowboy who quoted Steve Jobs and wore designer hoodies. But now, David wasn't just reclaiming dignity. He was unweaving them, thread by thread. Not with a meltdown. Not with lawyers and alimony threats, but with fine print and filings so methodically planted, even their accountants hadn't noticed. Brian stood up and grabbed his phone. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To beg for my own company back," he muttered, dialing furiously. Melanie sat there alone, staring at the blinking cursor in the email reply box. Her name, Melanie Monroe, still stared back from the header. For the first time since the kitchen that morning, the words hit her differently. Monroe. Not a name she wore. A name she borrowed. And the man she borrowed it from just turned it into a weapon. The restaurant was one of those places where the valet doesn't ask your name. He already knows it. Soft jazz, custom menus, centerpieces so tall they could have had zip codes. Everyone at the table had money, or the sin of it trailing close behind. Champagne flutes sparkled like they were trying to eavesdrop. David sat at the far end. Relaxed. Crisp suit. No tie. The kind of confidence that doesn't need volume. To his right was Richard Kelman. Across the table, fund managers, legacy investors, one ex-senator turned angel. It wasn't just dinner. It was a message. The place cards were printed on heavyweight cardstock. No mistakes. So when Brian walked in, 3 minutes late and noticeably out of breath, there was no seat for him. No introduction. No chair pulled out. He lingered, standing, like someone who crashed a funeral thinking it was a networking event. David didn't flinch. Just sipped his wine and carried on, listening to Richard recount the story of Vector One's early infrastructure challenges, leaving out Brian entirely, naturally. Names were named, but not his. Brian finally cleared his throat. "I, wasn't aware this dinner was happening tonight." Richard didn't look up. David did. He didn't sneer. Didn't smirk. He simply raised his glass and said, calmly, deliberately, "To history and those who respect it." A beat. Then, applause. Not thunderous. Not mocking. Worse. Polite. Affirming. The kind of applause that says, "You're not needed here." Brian stood frozen, unsure whether to fake a laugh or fake a phone call. In the end, he just left. Quickly. No goodbyes. A ghost retreating into his own irrelevance. The waiter quietly removed the empty plate that had been set as a contingency. No one asked about him again. That night, Melanie was sitting on the couch when her phone buzzed. "Brian." "He locked me out of my own date room. All access revoked. Legal didn't even see it coming. What the hell did he file?" She didn't answer. Didn't even open the full thread. Just turned the phone face down and let the silence breathe. Because she understood now. David didn't bluff. He didn't threaten. He simply waited for the moment everyone assumed he was done, and then reminded them. He wasn't loud, he was accurate. And now? He was visible, not as the husband they discarded, but as the man they should have never underestimated. It started with a text from her sister. Just 5 words. I ran into David. Radiant. Not better. Not doing okay. Radiant. As if the man she'd mocked into oblivion had emerged from the ashes moisturized, centered, and somehow 6 pounds lighter. Melanie stared at the screen, unsure whether to be annoyed or afraid. 2 days later, her brother called. The same brother who once joked that David's personality was like dry toast. The one who never invited him to poker night, even when they were married. Now his tone was clipped, accusatory. I saw the fundraiser live stream, he said. You were cruel. Why wouldn't he retaliate? She blinked. What fundraiser? He scoffed. Jesus, Melanie. The one for Veterans Healthcare. Sponsored by Kelman Group. David gave the closing speech. He crushed it. Talked about integrity, about rebuilding your identity when people take it from you. He had the whole room standing. And did you know he donated his entire advisory retainer to launch a recovery program for laid-off engineers over 50? Yeah, you didn't know? That's the problem. He hung up. Then came the worst moment yet. Rachel, her daughter, the one who used to roll her eyes at David, who once said he smelled like old furniture and mocked him for still using a landline. She stood in the doorway to Melanie's room, holding her phone, a screenshot pulled up. It was from Twitter. A freeze frame of David at the fundraiser, arms around 2 war vets, smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in years. Why'd you laugh at him? Rachel asked quietly. Melanie turned from the mirror. What? That morning. On his birthday. You laughed. You and Brian. Like he was a joke. Melanie inhaled slowly. Sweetheart, I didn't mean. But you did. Rachel's voice didn't rise. You laughed. I did too. And I didn't even know why. Just followed your lead. But now everyone's saying he's incredible. Even my English teacher posted his speech. She called it essential viewing for anyone who's ever been underestimated. Melanie's throat closed. The walls of her curated world, the brunch circle, the condo board, the corporate ladies' night group chats, were cracking. Not loudly. Quietly. Subtly. No one said it outright. But she noticed. Fewer replies. Fewer tags. Fewer smiles. And more reposts of David's speech. More LinkedIn mentions. More so proud to know him comments under the video of him shaking hands with Kelman, surrounded by veterans, engineers, board members, people who mattered. She tried defending herself to her sister. He abandoned us. You laughed at him. He blindsided me legally. He rebuilt something without you. She tried calling Brian, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried messaging Rachel later that night. No reply. Just silence. Not the David kind, strategic, cold, calculated. This silence was different. It was earned. And it was spreading. She found out the same way the rest of the world did, through a push notification. Breaking. Vector 1 acquired in quiet buyout. $190M valuation rumored. Melanie blinked at her screen. Thought it was a mistake. Maybe some other company. Some other Vector. But the sub-headline removed all doubt. Deal led by private holding group based in Vermont. Names linked to Richard Kelman and David Monroe. Her ears rang. She opened the article. Skimmed past the gushing words about the company's promise, its clean infrastructure, its remarkable leadership transition. The comments speculating whether it was a precursor to something bigger, a roll-up, maybe even a pre-IPO maneuver. But one line stopped her cold. Brian R. Caldwell's equity appears to have been diluted during late-stage negotiations. Unconfirmed reports suggest a clause was activated that reclassified his contributions as non-founding. Non-founding. The man who had once introduced himself as CEO of Tomorrow at every dinner party was now being legally referred to as a former contributor. She switched apps, typed frantically into LinkedIn. Brian's profile, untouched. Still read. Founder and CEO, Vector One. But his last update was 2 weeks old. No post. No celebration. No bragging. Nothing. Then, almost like a synchronized strike, her own inbox pinged. A short email. No greeting. No sign-off. Subject, correction request, profile inaccuracy. Dear Melanie, as part of the brand streamlining following the recent acquisition, we kindly request you update your LinkedIn biography to remove the line co-founder's wife, Vector One. This phrase does not reflect a formal role, nor is it appropriate in professional designation. Thank you for your cooperation. She stared at it. No rage. Just paralysis. All those brunches, the panels, the networking events where she'd introduced herself with that line, Brian's the brain, I'm the brand, and now she was being asked to scrub it like a wine stain from a white dress. She scrolled down, clicked open her own LinkedIn. It still said it. Bold. Right there in the bio she'd agonized over during spin class. Co-founder's wife, brand strategist building futures with vision. Now, it just looked pathetic. She hovered over the edit button. Paused, scrolled up, clicked on David's name. He had posted something that morning. A quote, paired with a photo of him and Richard in front of the lake, sleeves rolled, laughing like men who already knew what the end of the game looked like. The quote, revenge is for amateurs. Precision is permanent. No hashtags. No links. No flex. Just a sentence. And 8,400 likes. She switched back to her profile and stared at the cursor blinking beside the title she used to think meant something. Co-founder's wife. No? She couldn't even remember what exactly she had co-founded. The man she'd mocked into silence hadn't just won. He'd rewritten the story so she wasn't even in it. It was a plain package. No sender, no return address, just her name written in tight, meticulous lettering. The kind you'd expect on legal forms, not on cardboard boxes. Melanie opened it in the kitchen with a steak knife, expecting maybe a courier mistake or one of those weird apology baskets from a PR firm trying to get ahead of bad press. It wasn't a basket. It wasn't even padded. Just a single photo. Matte finish. Heavy stock. No frame. It showed a log cabin nestled in the curve of a mountain valley. There was snow on the edges of the roof, sunlight slicing through the trees behind it. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the 3 people in the foreground. David, of course. Standing relaxed, hair tousled by the wind, wearing a thermal Henley that made him look 10 years younger. A coffee mug in hand. Smiling. Next to him, Richard Kelman, grinning in mid-conversation, sleeves rolled up, clipboard under his arm. And then her. At first, Melanie's brain didn't register it. Too much disbelief. But the posture. The eyebrows. The way she stood slightly sideways like she was trying to look taller, she'd seen it 1,000 times. At school plays. In dressing room mirrors. Rachel. Her daughter. Her daughter. Standing beside David, laughing with him. Holding a drill in one hand, a tablet in the other. Hair tied back. Wearing a hoodie with a logo she didn't recognize until she squinted and saw the tiny lettering, DMK Systems. Not Vector. Not Brian's world. David's. They weren't just posing. They were working. And on the back of the photo, in David's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. She knows what real legacy looks like. Melanie sat down. Hard. The chair scraped against the tile. She read the sentence again. Legacy. The word she used to throw around at dinner parties when Brian was pitching investors in their living room. The word she used to justify turning David into an afterthought. A placeholder. The man you settle for before the actual story begins. But David had rewritten the ending. Not just for himself. For Rachel. Her daughter, who used to call him Nobody. Who once giggled behind his back during family therapy. Who wore Brian's startup hoodie like it was a badge of coolness. She had switched teams. Not out of rebellion. Not out of pity. But because legacy wasn't about brand decks and LinkedIn bios. It was about standing next to someone who showed up, even when you spit in his face. And David? He showed up. Every Sunday morning, helping with homework. Every flu season, holding her hair when she puked. Every school dance, waiting in the car with snacks and tissues. She just didn't see it. Not then. Now it was too late. Melanie sat there, the photo trembling in her hands, wondering how many times she'd said David's name like it meant nothing, and how many more times she'd have to say it now, knowing it meant everything. There were no threats, no lawsuits, no dramatic scenes, just a photo and a sentence, and the unmistakable, suffocating feeling that she'd lost something far more permanent than a man. She'd lost the one witness to her cruelty and the one person who had quietly forgiven her daughter for it. She didn't pack a bag, didn't grab a coat, didn't even lock the condo. She just drove, phone on silent, radio off, windows cracked to let the cold sting her awake. Her nails dug into the steering wheel like it could somehow steer her toward a version of reality where this wasn't happening, where she hadn't lost everything, and to him of all people. The road twisted through black pines and frost-slicked turns, each mile louder than the last. Not because of noise, because of silence. Because for the first time in her life, Melanie had nowhere to hide behind. No smirks, no status, no curated filters or perfect bios. Just guilt, raw and unfiltered. By the time she reached the cabin, it was near 2 a.m. The gravel under her tires cracked like bones. A faint amber glow spilled from the windows. He was awake. Of course he was. David had always been the type who couldn't sleep when something was unfinished. She stepped out, bare arms. No plan, just motion. Marched up to the door and knocked. Hard. Then again. And again. "David," she croaked. "Please." No answer. Then the knob turned. The door creaked open. And there he was. Older, yes, but not tired. Not broken. Just calm. The kind of calm that made your lungs forget how to work. He didn't say a word. Didn't invite her in. Just looked at her with the same expression he wore that morning in the kitchen, only now, it wasn't masked pain. It was peace. "I know I screwed up," she whispered, the words rushing out like water through a cracked dam. "I laughed. I followed Brian. I was awful to you, I know. But Rachel forgives you. She sees you now. That has to count for something. Please, I just want to understand. I want to know why you. 10 minutes. She talked for 10 full minutes. Tears. Regret. Apologies. Promises. David let her say it all. Didn't interrupt. Just listened, as if each word was a note in a song he already knew the lyrics to. Then he turned, walked to a shelf, pulled something down, and placed it in her hands. The envelope. The exact same one. Cream paper. Red wax. Still sealed. "You never opened it," he said. Her breath caught. With shaking fingers, she cracked the seal, peeled back the flap. Inside, a single sheet. No documents. No threats. Just a sentence, handwritten in a steady, slanted print. "This is the last time you'll ever underestimate me." No signature. No punctuation. Just the full weight of everything she thought he wasn't, now staring her in the face. She looked up, but the door was already closing. Not slammed. Just closing. Softly. Deliberately. Final. And this time, she didn't knock again.